Welcome, everyone. The class will start, Be'ezus Hashem, in 2.5 minutes. Okay, fellas. Okay, good afternoon. Let me get a little water so I get a little lubricated. Welcome. Thank you for joining. I just want to make sure that the online thing is working. Can you check on? Go into YouTube. Go into YouTube and see. Yeah. Okay. Check if If we're on live, just want to make a check. Meanwhile, thank you for coming. Let's again, I'd like to thank those who helped us out here, making this possible today. The Feldman family from Chicago, David and Merrill, may Hashem bench them with a lot of bracha, and the Lientz family here in Los Angeles. Thank you very much. I'm good? Okay, thank you. Okay, so today is an exciting class. It's a pretty big task. Now, those familiar with this, with my classes that I've been giving the last couple of years, I'm really not presenting anything particularly new. What I intend to do today, because I've discussed a lot of this in earlier shiurim throughout the years, from about 2016, 2015 already, 2016, I was talking a lot about Mashiach and discussed a lot of these topics. What I am excited about today is that to do a concentrate on everything, to do a summary, summarize it all, and present hopefully a strong presentation that will help all of us open up our eyes to realize that we are currently in the process of the redemption. That is something that we were told to do already in 1991. The Lubavitcher Rebbe had then said to us, said to his Chassidim and to the entire world, and to the Jewish world and the non-Jewish world, that we need to recognize that we are at the threshold of the redemption and that the redemptive process has already begun. The Rebbe did not talk about the Mashiach in 1990 and in 1991 as something in the future. The Rebbe was speaking about Mashiach as something of the current. And the Rebbe was pointing to certain things that are occurring in the world, that these are already the effects of Mashiach himself, of Mashiach Tzidkenu himself, having influence and shuffling things around in this world. Shuffling is not such a good word. Intrinsically transforming things in this world. That's what the Rebbe told us then. And the Rebbe said we should open our eyes. I studied with the people over here on Shabbos one of the talks the Rebbe gave. In 1991, the Rebbe gave a talk, Shabbos Parshas Balak in the summer, which was the 17th day of Tammuz, just past the 17th of Tammuz 2 weeks ago. So the last time we heard the Lubavitcher Rebbe speak in 1991 on Shavasa B'Tammuz. At that talk, the Rebbe seemed to be, I don't want to say upset, maybe a little frustrated with the notion that he is telling the world that Geula is here and redemption is here, but he is hitting a brick wall. Not necessarily with the world at large, but even with his own Chassidim. We're talking about Chassidim that were born and bred by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He took care of them, built them, and they developed into followers, devoted followers, so dedicated, so devoted, that they would literally lay their lives on the line for his vision, and for him and for his vision. Anything the Rebbe did, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe is very revolutionary. Obviously we know that, a great revolutionary, a great, always was outside of the box. And he was able to stimulate his Chassidim to go out of the box. The idea of going and meeting Jews and putting on tefillin on a first encounter, that's wild. That was never accepted in the Jewish normative Judaism. He just didn't do that. Sending families out across the world to set up the greatest network ever to stop assimilation and to connect Jews to Judaism. That's totally chidush, totally new. And yet Chassidim were there, like Nasev and Ishmael, let us do it, we will do what we will hear. When the Rebbe started speaking about Mashiach, not as an urgent matter that we need to push, but as something that's already real in the world and that's happening, and calling to his Chassidim to live it, to breathe it, to realize that the world is transforming in front of their eyes, he himself felt that he's hitting a brick wall. It's not going. And the Rebbe says these words, Es mezet as es kumt on schwer. It's being very difficult for people to realize where we're standing. So he gave and he gives the reasons. I'm not going to go through right now why the reasons are. But then he says, so what's the eitzah, what's the advice? He says to study and to learn about the Geula, to learn about Mashiach. Torah has the power to transform nature, including this stubborn nature of exile that keeps us trapped in that status quo of exile, that things are just the way they are. That stubbornness can break as well. And we can start becoming receptive to the Geula. One can ask and one can say, what difference does it make if we see it or we don't see it? Let us wait until it's fully realized. Let us wait until there is a full base on understanding, and we'll go and we'll have it, and we'll have Mashiach Vadai in this world. Why try to live? Why learn? What's the point of being excited about it? Let it happen when it will happen. The answer is everything happens through avoda, through work. We, the Jewish people, are feet are a little draggy. No, the feet are the steps. It's okay. It's okay. It's good. It's good. So that's much better. So what was I saying? Oh, we the Jewish people are the motor. We're the engine of the world. And we make things happen. And if when we believe in Mashiach, are excited about Mashiach, see Mashiach, and as a result of that, live like it is appropriate for a person to live in the days of Mashiach, then that becomes reality much quicker. We've reached a point in history where there is no turning the clock back. We've reached a point of history where the Geula is on a roll, and as we're going to discuss today. It's just, as the Chafetz Chaim said, there is a zman called Be'ita, which is the time of the redemption. But he says Be'ita, the time of the redemption, doesn't have to mean that there is a singular day and a singular hour. It's a period. It's a period. And within that period, we have an Achishena. We can move it, we can accelerate that process. Chas v'shalom. With the live stream, just I want to set it straight because I know there's a lot of people that want to listen. Try this again. Testing. Do you hear me now on YouTube? Go on YouTube. Start with Facebook. We're into YouTube. Sorry for the disruption. I just had an alert about the online situation. Yeah? What? I don't know, but... Okay, I'm sorry for the disruption. Here we are, we're back. The process is a process that's on the roll. The question is, we have the ability to speed it up and make it chas v'shalom slower. So the process of us opening up our eyes and being aware of what's happening, not just when we read them in the books, but when we actually see it tangibly occurring in the world, that puts us into, that makes it feel very real. And when it's real, we live differently. And when we live differently, we actualize, we produce the redemption, we cause the geula to happen. That's a very important idea. Now, I do want to say something, even though we're going to be speaking about a process, and it's a process that's spanning the time so far of close to 30 years. In a sense, it's a process that's already began from when the temple was destroyed, close to 2,000 years ago, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Or the process really began when Hashem creates the world. Or the process actually begins even before God creates the world. In Hashem's mind, the vision is Mashiach. So it's a process. We're going to be speaking about a process. But there's a very interesting distinction I would like to make, is when the Rebbe, whenever he spoke about Mashiach, there was a very, very important difference between his speaking about Mashiach in the past and speaking about Mashiach in the future. When he speaks about Mashiach in the past, he's always talking about a process. The process, for example, in the teachings of the Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov's Chassidus emergence is Mashiach. That's the beginning. That's one of the major thrusts and events that have to happen in the world, which are the beginning processes of Mashiach. It's the knowing of God, the revelation of Hashem's unity in the world that came through the teachings of Chassidus. Right? So that's a process. And again, very strongly in the Rebbe, as I mentioned, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash is when Mashiach is born. So it's a process. And the Rebbe points to the various different events that are happening in the world, showing the fall of communism, as we're soon going to see, and different things, which are all indicative of a process that's happening. That's when it comes to a moment ago. When it comes to how we're supposed to live in the future, when we cry out, we want Mashiach, we're not looking for, we want the process to unfold. It's not that we're waiting for, more things to continue rolling in the direction of Mashiach. That's not what we're waiting for. We are waiting for a climactic event. We are waiting for his galus, for a revelation of Mashiach in the world, for a stunning revelation of Mashiach in the world, one that's similar to Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea, and obviously beyond that. Something that's going to be extraordinary, unbelievably miraculous. You would see that in all the Rebbe's talks. The Rebbe would always, in every moment, every Shabbos, he would say by the Farbrengens that now, while we're Farbrengen, Mashiach walks through the door. He might come through the window. He should come in now. And in 1 minute, B'shai Techad, in 1 second, he will take us all, with all the Jewish people, to Yerushalayim, to Eretz Yisrael. He's not speaking about a process. He's speaking about something that has to happen like boom. So that's important. As happy as we are to be able to perceive and to point to a process that's happening, that doesn't suffice. It's good. We cannot accept, God forbid, a process unfolding over another 5 years, chas v'shalom, or 3 years, or even a year. Our crying, we don't cry now, we try to change these 3 weeks to happiness. Our energy now during the 9 days and coming to Tisha B'Av needs to be a longing for Mashiach now, for the full revelation of Mashiach in the world immediately. So that's a very, very important distinction that I wanted to make. The other thing is as follows. My second class today that I'm going to do at 4:30 Be'ezus Hashem, is deeply related to this class, but there's a fundamental difference between that class and this class. In that class, whatever I am saying to you is definitely holy, true, and real, and absolute. Why? Because I am speaking holy words from a tzaddik. I'm telling you what was said clearly. There's no question about it. What I am saying in this particular class today is my understanding of what's happening in the events. Now, we have the instructions from the Lubavitcher Rebbe that the Geula is here. We need to start opening our eyes and seeing it. He told us how to do it by learning Chassidus, learning about Mashiach, particularly learning Chassidus, and learning the teachings of all the, whatever Chassidus taught. And he says particularly the teachings, his own teachings his father on himself, and so on and so forth, which focused very much on the Geula to get an appreciation and understanding what's happening. Based on those teachings, you will see certain things. I can't vouch 1,000% that everything I'm saying, I hit the bull's on the bullseye. I don't know. It seems very real to me and absolute to me, and that's why enough that I am convinced of its validity that I can share it and publicly speak about it. But again, it's still my own interpretation, and in these things, if I'm wrong on something, I should say Hashem Yachaper, Hashem should forgive me. But other than that, this is very exciting. Okay, so first of all, the basis. The basis of why now? Why now? Why are we talking about this now? What is the evidence that the time of redemption has arrived? So the truth is, we'll base it on two very important ideas, pillars. Pillar number one, idea number one, is the cosmic clock. The cosmic clock is an idea that is discussed already way back then, that in the story of creation, they all speak about it. In the story of creation, Ramban, Abarbanel, Rabbeinu Bechaya, these are all the super giants, and all the other works of Chassidus, Kabbalah, but even in the Rishonim, they all talk about the idea that the world follows a 7-day. The 7 millennium is rooted in the 6 days of creation, or the 7 days of creation, and therefore, when we follow along the story of what was created every day, we get literally a snapshot, a bird's eye view of all of history. And they go through and they tell us up to their time that they lived, how we can see in their particular times what's happening. I'm not going to spend time on that today. What they all conclude, all of them, is that Mashiach, the period of Mashiach corresponds to Friday in history. The time when Adam was created, Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve. The ultimate human being is really Mashiach. He is the perfect human being. So when Adam opens up his eyes and he is meant to complete creation and to elevate all of creation, to recognize God, that's really Mashiach Tzidkenu. As it is hidden, the idea of the word Adam is spelled from 3 letters, Adam, David, Mashiach. Adam is the beginning, David is the midpoint, and Mashiach is the end time, the one that completes it all. Therefore, it's all in the 6th millennium. The 6th millennium began in the year 1240, and it's going to end in the year 2240. After the year 2240, we enter into the 7th millennium, which is called Yom Shekulei Shabbos. That's the day of Shabbos. People make a mistake, and I've heard this many, many times, and they say that Mashiach has to come within the next 220 years. It must come before Shabbos. The mistake of that is that implying that he's still on time if he comes in the year Chas v'Shalom 2230, 10 years before, or 5 years before, even just the year 2239. It's okay. I don't have to unvalidate my entire Jewish belief because Mashiach, it's okay. He's on schedule. There are those who would say that. What is wrong with that is the assumption is that the Shabbos day, which is really the world of Olam Haba, Yom Shekuloi Shabbos, is intrinsically the time of Mashiach. That's not true. There's two periods. There is Yemos HaMashiach, and then there is Tchias HaMeisim or Olam Haba. Now, Tchias HaMeisim also actually comes at an earlier time. It's really three periods. There's Mashiach, there is Tchias HaMeisim, the resurrection of the dead, and then there is Yom Shekulei Shabbos. And there's a lot of proofs to that, and I'm not going to go into the sources right now to share that for another time, because we really want to go through the current events, what's happening. But we've discussed that in earlier classes. The period of Mashiach is on Friday, and particularly Friday afternoon. So Friday afternoon on is the period, so is the Orach Chaim, and meaning from noon. When it becomes Friday noon, that's the period of Mashiach. As we discussed in earlier classes, a very, very fundamental element of the coming of Mashiach is the revelation. Essential to Mashiach is the revelation of Pnimius HaTorah, which means the esoteric inner light of the Torah to be revealed to the world. And that comes to the world in stages. The Zohar was revealed only in the later generations, relatively. It was written by Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, but it was revealed in the latter time of history. Around, Ramban already saw the Zohar and so on and so forth. But we're talking about 1,000 years. Then we had the Holy Ari, who advanced the understanding of mysticism to a whole new level. And as we discussed in earlier classes, the Arizal comes to the world and reveals his teachings. This week is his yahrzeit. The Holy Arizal's yahrzeit is in 2 days from now. So the Ari on the Hay of. So the Arizal only taught Torah for 2 years. He passed away, I think, at the age of 37. He was revealed at 35. For 2 years, everything we have from the Ari is teachings from 2 years. In any case, the Arizal appeared in the year 1573. That's the beginning of the last third of the night time. Because let's just make a little perspective for this. We take 1,000 years and we divide it into half and half. 500 years is night, 500 years is day. So from 1240 to 1740 is Thursday night. We divide that into 3 parts. The Ari is exactly by the last third of the night, where the Talmud says that the night has 3 parts, and the last third of the night, a baby, it says a husband talks to her wife, and a baby nurses from the mother. So it is explained what that means. The baby is the Jewish people waking up, and the nursing is we're beginning to be fed Messianic light. We're beginning through the Holy Ari and Tzfat, we're beginning to be nurtured with that great light of Mashiach. Well, when it becomes the crack of dawn, exactly at the time of the crack of dawn, you have the emergence of the Holy Baal Shem Tov. That's in the year 1733 is when the Baal Shem Tov reveals himself. That means that he's actually in full revelation and full teaching and full revolution of the Jewish world in the year 1740. And the Baal Shem Tov brings a whole new energy to Judaism, an enthusiasm, an excitement, a song, a messianic fervor, if we can say, to Judaism. And a fire, he ignites the fire in the soul. But what people don't know that much unless you've learned Chassidus, the primary principle of the Baal Shem Tov's teaching is Hashem Echad. How God's unity pervades all of existence, and how the world is not in any way a contradiction to the perfect unity of Hashem. That the God's unity doesn't mean only that there's only one God, but that God's unity means there's only one reality, and that's Hashem. And that's why Hashem is everything and everything is Him. That's the primary, and that's Mashiach. Is when the Malach Haaretz Deas Hashem. And when does that happen? Exactly in the beginning, 1740. It's the morning of Friday. Now let's continue. We have 500 years, which is the Messianic period. Let's zoom ahead, 250 years ahead, and we reach the year 1990. From 1740, 250, to get midday Friday. Midday Friday is when you start preparing for Shabbos. Intense preparations for Shabbos. It's exactly in the year 1990. That's when the Lubavitcher Rebbe announces, Higias Mangolaschem, the time of redemption has arrived. What happened in that year? So I think something that the Jewish people have missed, something so extraordinary and so unbelievable that we don't, and that the Rebbe was giving that message, but I think to a great degree we've missed it. What does the Rambam say is the primary difference of the days pre-Mashiach and Mashiach? What's the primary difference of the time of Golus and Geula? So the Rambam brings Shmuel, the statement of Shmuel. Ein bein olam hazeh liyamois HaMashiach. There's no difference between this life. Ela shibud malchi yos bilvad. The main difference that there is between pre-Mashiach era and the days of Mashiach is shibud malchius means that the Jewish people are not subservient to the nations. Subservient to the nations means that the nations get in the way of our observance of Torah and mitzvahs. Shibud malchus, that's of course the ultimate meaning of it. I mean, it doesn't mean that we have to pay taxes to the IRS. That's not the real inyan of shibud malchius. Shibud malchius means a malchus, the idea that the world, the Gentile world, is obstructing Jewishness and the Jewish people from doing their job. That has been the story of the Jewish history, of all of history, since when we stood at Sinai. I mean, in the beginning, we had from when we had the Golos, and then especially from when Titus destroyed the base of English. That's been the story. We've gone through persecution after persecution, waves and waves and waves of decrees against observance. It was difficult. It was hard. We always had to wiggle our way through. We always had to figure out. In addition to the physical persecution, there was lots of limitations and boundaries regarding to observance. And again, obviously, there were periods of relative menucha. There was a golden era of the Jews in Spain, and so on and so forth. There were times but in general, this has been our experience. After the Second World War, Jews came to America. Jews in America was a free country, you can practice your religion. So in a sense, you came to America, you were in a place where you can kind of not worry about Gentile interference with your observance of Yiddishkeit. But the environment was one in the early 1900s, that most people that came here didn't end up staying religious and observant in their Judaism for a simple reason, because if you didn't work on Shabbos, you'd lose your job. And I guess it wasn't in a point where you can do a lawsuit against somewhere that fired you because you didn't come work on Shabbos. That's the way it was till about the 1940s, 1950s, and that's when it all changed. But from the United States, from the liberty and the freedom that the Jewish community had in the United States of America, which again is very novel, from this liberty and from this freedom that the United States had, this freedom then continued to spread across the world, across countries. It just became more and more the normal thing that Yidden Jews can live and practice their Yiddishkeit without interference. But even though all this freedom was granted to the Jews on the West, there was still probably a third of the Jewish population, or close to a third, or at least a quarter of the Jewish population, about 3 million Jews caught behind the Iron Curtain, under the rule of a ruthless regime that did not allow the open observance of Yiddishkeit. So if you had a baby and you want to do a bris milah, you were basically risking a lot. You had to do it on the ground, and so on and so forth. And we all know the struggle that was happening. And it was so powerful. This government was so strong that people believed. I know Yidden told me that the Yidden over there the Jews had a belief that Mashiach will come, but the Soviet Union will always remain. You can't take down such a powerful, ruthless government. So again, even though to a certain degree the Golos lightened up for the Jewish people from around in the 20th century, and for sure in the second half of the 20th century, but Russian Jewry was still experiencing very, very great oppression. Till 1989 and 1990, it's exactly perfectly on the clock when we're hitting Friday, which is the main primary time for the coming of Moshiach. It's at that time that poof, the Iron Curtain collapses. And the way it fell apart, that's the biggest chiddush. The Rebbe then kept on talking about the fact that it came apart. He says revolutions like this usually take many, many years and a lot of bloodshed. We're talking about a change that's impacting hundreds of millions of people. Changes like this come with a lot of bloodshed. And over here, it happened miraculously in a peaceful way. It suddenly overnight turned, and the Berlin Wall came down, and what happened? 3 million Jews were freed. In a sense, more Jews that went out of Egypt. 600,000 Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. Okay, count the men and women, maybe it's the same amount. 3 to 4 million Jews were freed. That's unbelievable. And what really happened? Shibud Malchios is over. This that the Jewish people as a people are oppressed by the nations is forever gone. This is the first time of history. This is Moshiach. This itself is enough to be the ultimate evidence that we're in the time of the Geula. Golus, the way God created the world, the way Hashem created the world, is that He created the forces of Klippa, the forces, the very definition of the word Olam. In Chassidus it says, Olam means world. The word Olam has a deeper meaning, Helem. Helem means concealment. The very nature of existence is created until we fix it, until we reach what we call Olam HaTikun. The very nature of the world is to oppose godliness. Now, when you oppose godliness, you oppose the trio. What is that? God, the Jewish people, and the Torah. That's the opposition. And that's why we were always oppressed. But in regards to our observance connecting to Hashem through Torah, that was eliminated. And today, a Jew, not just today, in the last 30 years, a Jew is free to practice his Judaism across the entire world. I wouldn't suggest walking down the streets of Baghdad or the streets of whatever with your tallis and tefillin out, and this. I wouldn't suggest that. But in concept, it's permitted, you're allowed to be a Yid and a Jew everywhere. That is huge. The Rebbe pointed out various other things. And the one thing that I forgot to bring over here, give me 1 second, is the Rebbe pointed out at that time that it's not just pertaining to the Jewish people, it's also pertaining to the world reaching a certain level of coexistence, a certain level of development, that the world has reached a deeper level of civilization. And that is the fact that we know that the prophecy that it says in Yeshaya and Isaiah, that in the end of days, Lo yisago el go cherev, nations will not lift the sword one to each other. V'lo yomadu ol milchama, they will not practice war anymore. At that time, the Cold War kind of came to an end, even though it seems to be rattling itself a little bit in the last year or two. But in concept, at that time at least. But more than that, there's the famous pasuk which is written on the building of the UN, V'chatoisi charbechem le'itim. I will take your swords and I will crush them or turn them into le'itim, into plowshares. That means, what does that mean? That instruments of war are going to become instruments of productivity, instruments to help feed the planet. So at that point, the Rebbe pointed out that world powers, for the first time in history, world powers, it was a meeting between Gorbachev and Yeltsin, and some other, the French, this and the, from England, all the big Knackers, all the world leaders, got together in New York in January of 1992. In January of 1992, and they then signed a pact of denuclearization. And it was more than that they're going to use the monies that were till now used to weapons buildup is going to be used towards humane projects to help poor countries and so on and so forth. So the Rebbe then said, this is not the normal nature of the nations, of aggressive, that have been in the nature of mankind till now. Each one used their weapons and now they're using their monies, their weapons, and which would have gone to weapons, to use it to help. And another thing that he pointed out, at that time there was a rescue mission that was done in Rwanda, in which the United States flew in and they dropped they brought tremendous amount of food. They were attacked. There was an attack then, and it was a whole problem. But whatever it was the first time in history that a country used its military arms that were built and made for destruction. Instead, it's used purely for the goodness to help another human being. And the Rebbe then said, think about it, the United States was not getting anything from it. It's not like certain things they would do in the Middle East, you can say is because of the oil, because there's something to get from this. In Rwanda, we weren't getting anything from Rwanda. Hopefully Rwanda, one day will be able to produce what Rwanda can produce. But at this point, there was nothing for the United States to gain from that. It was a pure chesed, it was a pure kindness. And that is because the Rebbe says that's the development of humanity. That's part of Mashiach. Mashiach is not just for the Jewish people. Mashiach is universal. Mashiach is when a world cares about each other, a world lives in harmony and care and so on and so forth. This is a sign, clear, actual signs of the redemption. Now, just to put this in perspective, because when we turn on the news, we're always hearing really the bad stuff. And sadly, the news the last day since after Shabbos was horrible. When we think about a world that has violence, to think about the 30 people that were senselessly murdered for no reason at all, for no reason, just pure monstrous hate, reckless hatred. It's ridiculous. So the problem is that news agencies like sensation. That's how you get their ratings up. People are triggered by, and sadly, violence is still in the minds that still excite, that still we don't get rid of the Yetzer Hara completely. So as a result of that, they'd only like to report the negative. So you keep on hearing all the negativity that happens. We don't hear about all the good and charitable acts and kindness. We don't hear that most of the billionaires, or at least a big amount of billionaires in the world, have dedicated their fortunes to tzedakah. That is so huge. That is so opposite of the poritz that we knew all the years, that obviously they never had such kind of wealth, and I'm sure they're leaving over quite a bit for themselves, for their family, to live l'olam v'od in comfort. That's not the question. But the idea that we have to use our resources for the betterment of the world is messianic. This is Mashiach. This is a tikkun of the nations. The Rebbe then said, for the Jewish people, it's not a chidush. We were educated that way. We were trained this way. Avram Avinu, from our father Avram, we were told that the piece of bread that I have is yours before it's mine. That's the way we were taught. But for the nations who did not live that way, for all the years we've seen such the opposite behavior. For them to behave this way is a metamorphosis. It's a transformation. But what I do want to say is, if you take a look at various different, I'll give you some statistics. You can look this up on yourself. There is a website called Our World in Data. Okay? Our World in Data. And they have over there charts, different charts, or different, or they call it, and where they're basically, they're using World Bank, they're using various different sources to be able to see the progress of humanity. Our World in Data. Okay, so I'm just going to share with you a couple of aspects of life. So when you take a look in Rambam, when Maimonides talks about, when the Rambam talks about Mashiach, what does the Rambam say? And in that time, lo yesham, there will not be there, meaning there won't exist. Lo yirav, there won't be hunger. V'lo milchama, and there won't be any war. V'lo kina v'tacharus, there won't be any jealousy and competition. Mipnei, why? Shahatoiva tia mishpas harbe, because the goodness is going to be in such abundance. There's going to be so much. The world is going to have such plenty. There's going to be such a rich world that there's going to be no reason for people to bicker and to fight, because it's going to be just available for everybody. V'hamadanim, v'chol hamadanim, and all delicacies, mitzuyim are going to be so available, ka'afar, like dirt. And here's the words of the Rambam: the occupation of the entire world will only be ela l'dasas Hashem bilvad. Mankind will have one obsession. They will be obsessed with knowing God. That's going to be the obsession and the pursuit of mankind. Let's see how we're doing. If we say that we're in the Rebbe even used terms in 1991 that we are now standing al saf at the threshold. Hascholas yemois hamashiach. Now, if you know the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe fought very, very, very strongly against the whole concept, Zionistic idea, that the establishment of the state of Israel was reishis tzmichas keulasenu, is the beginning of the tzmicha of our redemption. The Rebbe pointed out, and he spoke about it again and again and again, that when there is a process that is against Torah and mitzvahs and so on and so forth, and it's establishing an Israel based on secular principles and not on a connection to God. So the Rebbe, and for other things, the Rebbe pointed out that these things are not an indication of Geula. It's actually, he says, it's choshech, it's the darkness of the greatest darkness of Galus. He never said that it's not a stepping stone that's going to eventually lead and the Jews have Eretz Yisroel and from there. But you can't call it the beginning of Yemais HaMashiach. He said the opposite. It's the darkest moments of exile. He says, in the ultimate darkness is when you can confuse darkness for light. Yet in 1990, the Rebbe changed his tone in his words. He said, we are actually living al saf, by the threshold, hascholas of the beginning of Yemais HaMashiach. That's amazing. If that's the case, let's check it out with Rambam. Rambam gives us the description of Yemais HaMashiach. So over there in that chart, I'm going to give you a little just, now this is a measurement just from the 1800s. Now if you measure this from way back, the 1600s, 1500s, 14, 12, it gets darker and darker. Really not much changed in the world for thousands of years. How many people lived in extreme poverty in 1820? How much percent of the world population lived in extreme poverty 200 years ago? Anybody want to guess? Percentage-wise. 89.15. Almost 90%, literally 90% of the world population lived in extreme poverty. By 1950, 130 years later, it dropped to 63%. Okay, that's a pretty significant drop. And this is the way it was. You took until 1820, talking about all of history, it kind of was hovering around those numbers. From 1950, it was down to 63%. In the year 2015, 3 years ago, 9.9, basically 10% of the world population lives in extreme poverty. And it might be less 4 years later. This is in 2015, I'm sure it's less. At the same time that the world population probably doubled or more from 1800. Now you have close to 8 billion people on the planet. You were dealing with much less people. The world is providing today for its people like never before. People are living much better lives today. They're far less hungry. Now 10%, or even if it's 8%, there's still a lot of people that are living in extreme poverty. There is what to fix. But we're heading in a direction that in 10 years from now, there doesn't have to be one hungry person in the world. How about in terms of how many people were illiterate? In 1800, same thing, 90% of the world population was illiterate. In 1950, 44%. And in 2016, down to 14%. Now, obviously, if people are learning how to read and how to write and so on and so forth, they can better their lives and access and build themselves up and not living not living stuck in a helpless situation. They're going to be catching up very, very quickly. These third world countries are going to catch up very quickly to normative living. And we're talking about billions of people. A change of 90% to 15%. How about child mortality? How many children were expected to die, God forbid, before they were 5 years old, if you were born in 1800? Almost 50% chance that you would not make it past 5 years old. Almost half the babies in the world population, 43% in 1800. I'm sure in 1600s, it was much more than that, okay? So you're talking about 5,500 years of human history, where it's basically the same, and suddenly from 1800, okay. In 1960, it's still 18%. In the year 2017, you're not going to believe it, it's almost eradicated completely. 4% of the world population of babies that are born will die, chas v'shalom, before the age of 5. And again, this is 2017, it might be down to 2% now. How about how many countries people live in a democracy and live in freedom? In 1816, less than 1% of people lived in a democratic country. It was very, right? Now in 2015, it's over 50%, 55% live in democracies, and even the places that are not democracies are mediocre closer. This again, it's a huge change. Life expectancy. Talk about when people say, oh, life is so bad today. The world is so terrible. It's not so terrible. It's unbelievably better to be alive today than ever in history. Life expectancy in 1800 in Europe, okay? When a person, the average lifespan in Europe, if you were born in 1800, you lived to a good, ripe old age of 33 years old. Yes, that was the average life. That's right. Life expectancy was 33. In 1950, 64, more than doubled. And in 2015, 80 years old is the life expectancy in Europe. Actually, it's interesting. I looked at that graph. Europe seems to be even the top of the United States. I don't know. They take maybe more vacation. I don't know what it is that the Europeans, then they don't feel so guilty when they eat, I think. That's what it is. How about war? How about war? They have, again, I couldn't figure this, I just looked this, I had this written down a long time ago and I lost my pamphlet, so I rushed today back to the website and I jotted down some numbers and I was looking for various different graphs that I saw in the past, which I didn't find. But here it says percentage of years that global world powers were at war. Okay, global world powers were at war. The war was at war. We're talking about a world of war. In 1600, 100% of the time, the world powers were at war. In the year 2000 to 2015, 0% of the time at war. Now, are there any clashes still happening in various different pockets of the world? Yes. But we're talking about people dying in wars. It's almost out. It's almost extinct. With all the news of gun violence, and by the way, that too dropped tremendously compared to what it was, which I didn't get the chance to write down. So the dark world that has been that we've been told of, that always seems to be projected on television and so on and so forth, is not true. If you take the data and you see where it's happening, mankind, the world is moving to a golden era, to an unbelievable time. And now let me quote you a quote which I hope I can pull it up here. Just give me a second. Which someone you wouldn't expect quoted Maimonides, quoted Rambam. I'll tell you who he is after I read what he says. Talking about the future. So for instance, he says, so tasks like cleaning a room or assembling something, if those can be done by robots, eventually those robots will not be super expensive. So basically this Erev Shabbos, I came late to shul. Anybody that was here who gave me dirty looks, I'll tell you why. Because my wife said I better get home and put together the bed that I bought, that I picked up for my son, that I told her I'm going to put together earlier, that I didn't. And I ran home before Shabbos, and I was working on the bed. And of course, I thought I could do it in 10 minutes. And then whatever. But I got it done like the Eberster got the work done. The second Shabbos, I got maybe a minute before that, because you have to add a minute before. But I got the bed done. I feel very proud. I usually am not good at this, but I got that bed done. In any case, these tasks are all going to be done by robots very soon, because they're going to be inexpensive. Okay? But let me read you over here. Looking still further out into the future, so-and-so said he believes AI may eventually force us to redefine work itself and the role it plays in human life. He suggests we may evolve towards higher pursuits. A day will come when we won't be so focused on just working and avoiding disease. We'll need some new spiritual cause that binds us other than just the basics. Let me go back to Rambam. V'lo yehi esek kol ha'olam kulo. The world will not have any other occupation, ela ladas es Hashem, only to know God. A higher spiritual pursuit that will envelop all of mankind, that everybody will be busy with. So who's quoting Rambam? Not the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Bill Gates is the one who's talking now about how very soon he's going to be seeking out Maayon Yisroel to teach Chassidus. That's what the world, this is the highest command. If anybody wants to invest in the future, you can send $1 million to this center. This is where it's happening. It's the higher teachings of Chassidus that is the future. This is going to be the most precious commodity. Money and everything's going to be available there's enough money, there's enough everything forever. There's nothing to do other than to know Hashem. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah dvar Hashem Yerushalayim. We are there already. We're there already. We just have to sort things out first. Just sort things out a little bit until the world will be focused and know where it's at. So this is the first idea I mentioned to you earlier. The basis, the pillar for all of this saying the time is now, is we're with the clock. Basically, what time are we now on the clock? We are almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon of Friday. Okay, by that time, we're pretty getting, if you didn't leave your shop at 12, you're leaving. Every moment, Shabbos is becoming more and more evident as you're going from 1 o'clock to 1:10, right? People are going home. You're putting up the kugel, you're showering, you're doing your last minute shopping. You're getting ready for Shabbos. This is the time. The fact that the world is chaotic, I'll quote Rabbi Tzvi Freeman, which is really a great idea. The fact that the world looks so much chaos happening. Well, go look at a Jewish home Erev Shabbos right before Shabbos. You wouldn't believe the peace and tranquility that's going to happen suddenly when the Rebbetzin or whatever, the woman of the house lights the candles and suddenly, boom, the house transforms. All that craziness and yelling and screaming and madness and is all suddenly, it's like who would believe that Shabbos came? But right before that, it looks like a tornado hit the house. That's the time we're going through right now. There's a lot of reshuffling. There's a lot of craziness happening. But it's because the final preparations are being made. So that's the pillar number one. But pillar number two, and I believe this is, for me, the most important, more important than anything else. This might be shocking to many, and I will elaborate on this on our second class today after 4:30. We once, the Jewish people, long time ago, knew of a concept called a Navi. A Navi was a man who speaks to Hashem and comes with information and tells the Jewish people that certain things the Eibishter has told me that to tell you that certain things are happening. That's a Navi. And we've had prophets from Moshe Rabbeinu. The others were also prophets, but mainly from Moshe Rabbeinu and onward, we merited to have direct communication to God through these magnificent people like Shmuel HaNavi and then Eliyahu HaNavi and various other prophets and so on and so forth. And Yirmiyahu and we haven't had prophecy. The Gemara says from the days of Chagai, I think Zechariah, Malachi, Nistalka, that the prophecy departed. I'm going to elaborate on this later. It's really amazing. The Rambam, however, says, the Rambam writes, Ein safek, there is no doubt, shechazaras hanavua hu akdamas hamashiach. Hear these words. Rambam writes it in Ageres Taimon. The return of prophecy is the introduction to Mashiach. That means that prophecy will return to the Jewish people before the coming of Mashiach. Prophecy will return. Now let's stop for a moment and I'll tell you something else about prophets. Prophets weren't too popular, especially when they came and they were talking about things that no one could believe would happen. Yirmiyahu HaNavi had a lot of tsaris. They put him in a pit. They didn't like him. He was predicting things that was not part of everybody's understanding. He was talking about a whole new situation of a destruction. And he was not popular. And people laughed at him. Prophets were also sometimes referred to as Hamashuganer in the Navi. Hamashugazet. Now, the simple reason is because when they would have a prophecy, they would actually start convulsing. They would fall on the floor. There would be a situation where you can see they're having an out-of-body experience, but their body was in a state of total disruption. And that's why they looked, it says in one place, they threw off their clothing. It was a weird situation, a prophet. So that's prophecy. Prophecy, it says, is going to return. In 1991, I got married in the summer of 1991 in August. So in Tezvav Elul. Yud Dalet Elul was the Shabbos before my wedding. It was my Ofruf in Borough Park. I was living then. I had my Ofruf. That very Shabbos, not too far from where I lived in Borough Park, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was in Crown Heights. And he spoke that Shabbos was Parsha Shoftim. And the Rebbe gave a stunning sicha, a stunning talk that left Lubavitch with their mouths open. Now, Lubavitch usually is very comfortable with, the Rebbe says something, we can go and spread it and talk about it and share it with the whole world. Not after that Farbrengen. The people that were supposed to go on the radio and convey what the Rebbe said at the Farbrengen kind of had their, because every Motzei Shabbos was a broadcast, didn't know what to do, because it was like, what the Rebbe said at that Farbrengen was very shocking. The Rebbe spoke, and I'm going to share this with you on my second talk today. The Rebbe spoke how before Mashiach comes, prophecy will return to the world. He says there will be a prophecy, and it happens before Mashiach, and the world needs it before Mashiach, and so on and so forth. And the Rebbe starts to say that the Baal Shem Tov and the Tzaddikim, that they had vision, they can see across the entire world, were already the beginning of the return of prophecy. And that's why they had such a vision and such ability to see things across the whole planet, so on and so forth. Then the Rebbe continued and to describe how his father-in-law is a prophet. The Friediger Lubavitcher Rebbe is a prophet. He spoke about. And the Rebbe spoke of himself, but in the way that he always speaks about himself, kind of extension of his father-in-law. The Rebbe Nasider Reinu is a prophet, and he's prophecy, and the whole world has to know that. And it needs to be nisparsen. We have to publicize this in the whole world, and that there is now a prophecy to the Jewish people that he gias man gulaschem the timer, and that he's saying it not as a chacham, not as someone who has vision. He's saying it as a prophecy, and that it should be publicized across the whole world. That he's a prophet, that the Rebbe is a prophet, and that we were zeicha, that, and I'm going to read it to you later inside, that we were zeicha, that the Eibishter was memana, Hashem appointed a person in our generation, in the words of the Rebbe, who is shaloi be'erach, above the generation, is way above the generation, to be the prophet of the generation. And therefore, and he says the prophecy that he gias man gulaschem, the prophecy that la'al to l'geula, that immediately is the redemption, that we're at the time of the redemption. Chassidim didn't know. Some guys got really excited. They wanted to go out and put it out in the New York Times, everywhere. The prophet, others said, listen here, just to put it out like that without, that would not work. So it was a back and forth. But whatever it is, the Rebbe said this. And the Rebbe makes reference to this nevuah, the nevuah of the nevuah of the Geula. Now it's interesting. It's hard to say reasons. I don't know these mystical reasons. But the week before that was the Kreinhaus riots. In other words, that week leading up to that explosion, to that revelation, to that that we have a prophecy, and that there was a lot of tension, I would say, in the world before that can be said. That's what I would think. It was interesting that there was it was involved the Rebbe too, because there was a car that was accompanying his when he went to his father-in-law's grave to daven for hours, and that hit and Nebuch killed a African American kid, and because of that riot started. It was a whole crazy story, and the Jew Nebuch, a young Jewish student, was killed by the mob, and this was right. Now we're busy with Al Sharpton, who was then very much involved in instigating the mob and so on and so forth. In any case, it's interesting that it happened right before that Shabbos. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, prophecies are shocking to people, especially when you're dealing with a people that has not had prophecy for thousands of years. And it's interesting, I really want to go through this with you later so you can see how the Rebbe builds it piece by piece with Mara Makaimis, and meaning with all sources, he had it, and the Rebbe didn't say keep this a secret. He said it should be spread over the whole world. And he had the Sicha, like all of his talks, printed in the Allgemeiner Journal. It used to be printed. The next week, they would print the talk the Rebbe gave. This Sicha was printed for everybody to read. It means it wasn't meant to be a secret. It was meant to be stated. There's a prophecy on the Geula. And prophecies are something of absolute. And when a prophecy is given for good, it cannot be retracted. In other words, you can't say that if we misbehave, we weren't zeicha. That doesn't work. That's what a negative prophecy. A positive prophecy doesn't work that way. So we're going to speak about the prophecy later, but I'm just saying, we're talking about the fundamental premise that we're living now in the time of redemption needs to be understood on the basis that this is the time that has been always set, etched in the calendar as a time of Geula, and connected to this fundamental, this unbelievable godly, that means, as the Rebbe says in the Sikha, the reason why we have to listen to the prophet is not because of his own personal virtue. We listen to the prophets because these are not his words, these are the words of Hashem that he gave through this prophet. In any case, if that's the case, we have solid grounding. Okay, so now let's take a look at what happened in the world other than what I mentioned earlier in 1990, what was taking place. Amazing things were happening. Again, as the fall of the communist communist regime. Oh, another thing that happened right at that time, which is related to what I mentioned before from Bill Gates, is that in 1991 was the first worldwide web browser was launched. That's when we entered into the information age. That's purely Mashiach. The fact that we have that ability to be able to connect to the entire world and to spread information. The entire internet was created for one person, and that's Mashiach himself, a Melech HaMashiach, to be able to teach all of humanity and ultimately inspire humanity with the teachings of Torah that are going to flood the world, the Torah Chadasha Me'iti Teitze. That's the purpose of the internet. We always know the rule, Klipa Koidma Leperi. The fruit, before a fruit grows, the shell grows first. So the misuse of the internet for all kinds of dark things that when you have these people that encourage each other to go out and shoot up places where they have these sites that get them to do that, and all kinds of other sinful things that happen on the internet, that's part of the klipa that always attacks something first. The Gemara says the world was not worthy, or the Medrash says it, the world was not worthy to use gold. Gold is something so beautiful and so special, it's not meant for the usage of humanity. It was meant for one thing, for the Mishkan. Gold was meant for the Mishkan. If so, the Gemara says, watch what all the golden temples that were built for the idols. So the Eibishter says, I should destroy my world just because of the Tohin, just because they will misuse it. I'm not going to hold back something so important that I am giving for a precious purpose. The internet is the ultimate gift that God has given us to be able to teach the entire world. Light. Kimitzion Teitzei Torah Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim is going to be a live feed from the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, where everybody's going to be able to tune it on. You want to hear the Levium sing today? You have a Bose surround sound, sit in your house and be taken before you daven by the song of the Levites. And every day is going to be new singing, and wow! And to watch and to be able to experience the Kohanim doing the Karban Tamid and so on and so forth, all that. Today we had the merit to watch a video presentation of the Second Temple. And I have to say, I learned about the Beis HaMikdash all the time, but at a certain time while I was watching it, I started feeling goosebumps, and my eyes teared up, and I felt such a yearning. Why? Because suddenly you get to see the size of the Beis HaMikdash, what it really was like. The doors opening up, and you're walking into this magnificent palace. It's so powerful. And I imagine, this video is the quality of this presentation. I mean, I'm happy. It was a nice thing they did, but you can't, even in terms of the way they produced it, the production of it that would be produced by Hollywood would be a whole different story. Now, the ability to tune in and watch the real Beis HaMikdash in action and everything, it's amazing. The connection to Hashem that we'll all have. That's the purpose for it. That's the purpose for technology. That happened literally. It's so amazing how exactly when we get to 1990, 1991, you have this, we enter into the information age. What is Mashiach? The information age. That's what everybody's going to be busy with. Ladas es Hashem, to know God. It's crazy. Now, in addition to that, one of the things the Rebbe pointed very strongly was to the concept, to the idea that the nations of the world, to the war that was taking place in our first Persian Gulf War. The Rebbe then brought different midrashim that speak that there is going to be a threat of war coming from Paras. And Paras includes the area of Iraq. Threats of war are going to be coming from Paras, where Paras is going to threaten the king of Arav, the king of Arabia, which is Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. And the king of Paras is going to come and take and get help from the king of Aram. And the Rebbe then pointed out that Aram is America, because America, it represents the European countries, that Rum, they're the superpowers. And the Jewish people are going to be very, very scared. That's what it says in the Medrash. It's a Miyalka Chamoyne in Yeshaya. I'm going to read it again in my second class today. We're going to go over that. And the Jewish people are going to be frightened. They're going to be scared. They're going to say, Lahechan Neilach, where should we run? Where should we go? And the Eibishter is going to say to them, Banai, my children, why are you afraid? Don't be afraid. The time of your redemption has arrived. So during the first Persian Gulf War, the Rebbe kept on pointing to this Medrash. And the Rebbe was saying, this is all Simanei HaGeula, and this is an indication the time has arrived. Geula is here, and this is the Medrash says, and this is being fulfilled right now. Now, again, the full Besuras HaGeula that happened over those years, that I will leave for the second class today. Okay, so we will discuss this. I'll read for you the Medrash from inside. I'll follow you along the various different times how the Rebbe progressed with this Medrash. Astounding things that I believe most people that are Hasidim and learn that have not paid attention to. It's really, really amazing, this Besuras HaGeula, because people are still in their mind thinking that the Rebbe was praying and hoping that Mashiach is going to come. And it's a very, very, very misunderstanding. That's not at all what was said. Things were said very clearly and very absolutely. And the questions that we have now, that it's 30, 25 to 28 years since we heard these talks, is not a question at all either. We're going to leave that for later. But I don't want to go there. What I do want to talk about is the idea that, which is very, very important, and that the Rebbe then was explaining in so many talks that what's a chidush, what's such a big chidush that happened by the Iraq war. The novelty and what makes it messianic is that, I mentioned this on the other day when we had the shir on Shabbos. In Williamsburg, there used to be the Chassidus squad. And what was the Chassidus squad? If some Puerto Rican fellow decided to mess with a Jew, I remember this, I didn't grow up in Williamsburg, or in a borough park, what else happened? If he stole a bike, or if he threw down someone's hat, or if he yelled something explicitive towards a Yid, there was a special word, and that word was called chaptzim. And chaptzim meant basically in Yiddish, go get him. And you would have like a mob of 300 Chassidim would chase after this poor fellow who made a big mistake to start up with the guy, and they would let him have it. So the Jews were kind of protected. We came back from the ghettos. We remembered those days. You didn't stand up for yourself. Forget about it. So these Chassidim stood up for themselves. If anybody messed with them in New York or whatever it was, and people knew that you don't start up with the Chassidim of Williamsburg if you don't want to have a bloody nose. That's the way. Until the police would come. That was the thing. So it was always, who stood up for the Jews? The Jews had to stand up for themselves. That's the way it was. The chiddush that happened in 1991 that the Rebbe was pointing out to was that a coalition was formed by all the nations, all the powerful countries of the world, the powerful armies, that laid siege on Iraq and demanded from Iraq to pull out of Kuwait, demanded that they would pull out of Kuwait quickly, and if he doesn't do so, he's going to have to face the threat of an attack. He was stubborn. If you remember those days, I remember hearing it. He was talking about, like Iran speaking today. He was talking about, this is going to be the mother of all wars. We're going to teach these guys a lesson. Just wait till I let my scuds and who knows what. And he threatened Israel. And in Israel those days, the Jews were terrified. The Yidden went and were getting gas masks because this guy was a tyrant. He was capable of mass murder, and he gassed his own people. And imagine what he would do to the Jews. This was his thing, as he was going to do. The Rebbe then was quoting this Medrash again and again and again and again, and telling the Jews in Eretz Yisrael, don't be afraid. The Rebbe dismissed the whole notion of gas masks. It was unnecessary and unimportant. Now, obviously, if you're not a Navi, you're taking a very big risk. Everybody knows the Lubavitcher Rebbe. One thing you can know, whether you're a big Chassidus or not, you know that he loved Jews. He cared about every Jew in the world. How can he put millions of Jews in Eretz Yisrael in danger by telling them, don't take a gas mask, when you know that this guy has has weapons of what do they call it? Chemical weapons. He has chemical weapons. He has nerve gas. He has all these things. How can you do that? Unless you know. And the Rebbe kept on telling everybody, go to Eretz Yisroel, don't be afraid. So same thing like before the 6 Day War. Also, when everybody was afraid, all the yeshiva bachrim from all over were coming home, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, don't be afraid. He said a week before that, by a Lag BaOmer parade. We're not talking about something the Rebbe said quietly. The Rebbe stood by a Lag BaOmer parade in front of the whole world, telling everybody the Jewish people are going to witness an incredible miracle. Talk about a Navi in action? How in the world? And I know, even the Kloisenberger Rebbe, a big tzaddik, left Eretz Yisrael. He was afraid before the 6 Day War. The Lubavitcher Rebbe then said about the Kloisenberger Rebbe, I can't have tainus on him. Of kenach neshavim katainis, I can't have complaints because he lost already a wife with 11 children in the Holocaust. So it's understood that before a war he left. But the Rebbe then stood and said openly by a children's rally that the Jewish people are going to have a stunning, miraculous victory. You saw clearly you're talking about a person who has inside information delivered to him from above. In any case, by the Iraq War, the same thing. But what the Rebbe pointed out, instead of we having to send out our own group of chaptzim guys to beat up the bully who was around this, the nations in the world fought for us. They pummeled Saddam Hussein so badly, it came in 2 phases. The first phase, they let him stay alive, kind of. They beat him up bad enough, but that he should be able to recognize and be shamed in front of the whole world. And the Rebbe was then pointing out why it's similar to Mitzrayim. It's similar to Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Rebbe said, because one of the greatest miracles that happened by Yetzias Mitzrayim was L'makei Mitzrayim bivchoreihem. That one of the big miracles that we do on Shabbos HaGadol, Shabbos before Pesach, we celebrate, is that the firstborn of Egypt, they themselves campaigned to free the Jewish people. They themselves went on a campaign to fight to liberate, because they were afraid of the Makkah, because Moshe Rabbeinu warned them there would be a plague of the firstborn. So because of that, they were afraid. So they went and campaigned because Pari didn't want to let the Jews out, and there was a civil war in Egypt. So the Rebbe says that's the ultimate miracle, when the darkness itself, when the forces that have been Golus themselves, when Golus itself is turned upside down to become an ally and an assistance of the Jewish people and of holiness, that's the ultimate display of God's truth. That's what the Rebbe said. And he said that is happening now. That these nations that till now have not been the one to come save the Jewish people during the Holocaust. We didn't have all these nations coming to run and save us. We didn't have, this never happened. And yet all these nations got together and a campaign and eliminated the threat without the Jewish people, without Israel having to lift a finger and put our own armies in danger. This is the idea. As a result of that, the Rebbe says this is the Geula. So I want to say, and again, comes out, that the main idea that we need to look at when we are looking at Mashiach, based on this teaching of the Rebbe, is that the entire process of Geula that we're going to talk about today is all based on the idea that the nations themselves are transformed. The Gentiles themselves have a 180 turnaround, and they make an about face from operating in a certain manner, and they turn around completely other way to the assistance of the Jewish people. That, my dear friends, has been happening in the last 3 years. It's causing the greatest chaos on the one hand, but on the other hand, you're watching in front of your eyes powerful governments being taken over and transformed against what we would think is the tide of the time, based on what the media and so on is feeding, and that which is kind of trying to be propagated. Is that the right word? What was the word I'm looking for? Propaganda? No, not propaganda. I'm looking for promulgated. Opposite of what is being, yet astoundingly, governments, those in power, I'm not talking about those making a lot of noise. Those making a lot of noise are making a lot of noise. And they're screaming and making a whole ton of noise. But that's just noise, because they're not in power. The ones that are in power are incredibly aligned and synchronized with the Jewish people like never before. Obviously, I am talking about Donald Trump in the United States of America in his assistance to Eretz Yisroel, to the Jewish people, in turning around the tide that was very anti-Israel that we're going to talk about soon. I'm talking about just now in England when Boris Johnson won the election, which is again a friend, an opposite of the general European Union. I'm talking about the most anti-Semitic country in the world elected a Jewish president or prime minister. Ukraine has a Jewish prime minister. I'm talking about Russia, where Vladimir Putin was once part of the KGB, is now a big assistant to the land of Israel quietly. He doesn't make it so loud, but the very fact that Israel can go and bomb the Iranians in Syria all the time, when the Russian, right under the nose of the Russians, is unbelievably miraculous. His assistance, he has a love for the Jewish people quietly, because officially he has to be a Russian anti-Semite to a certain degree. But the Pneumius, internally, it's not that way. Brazil has also a Donald Trump figure, kind of. And these are powerful rulers that are popping up, powerful leaders that are popping up everywhere in the world to bring about a complete metamorphosis and a transformation and support. And the most devastating idea ever, which is the most anti-Mashiach and anti-Geula and anti-redemption, which is the resolvement of the Palestinian and Israeli conflict through a two-state solution with splitting Jerusalem, which was till now untouchable. Till now, this was like etched as the first of the 10 commandments of humanity, that Israel must make peace by dividing its land and giving half of Jerusalem to Palestinians, which includes the Temple Mount that we learned about today, which includes the Beis HaMikdash, which basically means no temple. Again, let me say that again. Basically means no third Beis HaMikdash, which basically means no Mashiach. That idea has been busted. It doesn't exist anymore. Everybody knows it's a dream now. Just 2.5 years ago, everybody bowed down to this idea. This was the word. This was the way we're finally going to bring world peace. Now, if Donald Trump did anything, if there's any credit to him, if there's anything, the very fact that he busted this, for that itself, we will tilt our hats and say this itself is an unbelievable bracha. But we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. I don't want to interrupt with, I'll take your question later. Write it down. So let's get to that. See, these are transformations. And it's all happening without a Mashiach coming and waving a flag or a wand or a stick like Moshe Rabbeinu did in Mitzrayim. It's all happening from within nature and from within the world. So let me first explain an idea, an important idea, which is also, when the Rebbe spoke about the Geula beginning to happen, and how we see the world is filling with tzedek v'yosher and kindness, and people are becoming more humane and more caring, and so on and so forth. And people are very familiar with that talk, but there's another talk that people are not familiar with. In the very same breath, when the Rebbe talks about it, the Rebbe says, however, we see a contradiction. And that very contradiction is also from the signs of Mashiach. What's the contradiction? In 1991, the Rebbe says it's a chiddush, it's a novelty, that nations that kind of stand so much for tzedek v'yosher, so much for righteousness and straightness, have an exceptional rule when it comes to the Jewish people. In other words, even though they support, they're very kind and caring in their general approach to life, but when it comes to Israel, there's different rules. So the Rebbe says this. He says, Le'idach. First he talks about that this is in, let me show you which one, Shabbos Bereshis of Tafshin Nun Aleph, 1991. He says, Amuratz b'mifratz haparsi. First he talks about the stuff that are happening. At that time it was at the heat of the the Persian Gulf War, number one, the first war. And he says that's his indication of Mashiach. And then he says, Ule'idach on the other hand. B'yamim elu, in these very days, is asvu umoy sa'olam, the nations of the world have gathered together, shivim umoy, 70 nations, ba'oifen derag shu goyim ulu'umim yehegu. He's quoting a pasuk in Perek Beis of Tehillim, where it says that the nations have gathered together and they are speaking, they're talking amongst themselves. Lithuanian Yisroel. Hear these words. They are arguing against Israel, against the Jewish people. Listim atem. This is, the Rebbe says it's an old story. They are picking up on the first Rashi of the Torah. Rashi says the nations in the world will tell the Jewish people, you are thieves because you have taken the land away from others. You're occupiers of land. You're supposed to be the morality of the world. You're supposed to be the conscience of humanity. And here you are behaving like they want to say today, and you're hearing it today again and again, like Nazis. And just like we're hearing it now in Washington. That just like we had a right in the United States to boycott by the squad. I told you I would speak about the squad, right? So they're coming up with this idea that just like we had a right to boycott the Nazis because of their atrocious acts that they were doing, and in North Carolina, we have to stand up against the murderous Israel, who's been mistreating the Palestinians in the worst way possible, and as a result of that, and the Jews are thieves and occupiers of land that's not theirs. So you see the Rebbe says that they're all gathering together to contrive ideas of how to force Israel up against the wall. And the Rebbe says these words, Loi rak benegeya leGaza, not only towards Gaza, or Shamron, okay, which is what they call today the West Bank. They're talking about Judah area, Yehuda, Koilel Yerushalayim. He says they have a chutzpah to contest Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. Ira Bira Shel Eretz Yisroel, the capital of the land of Israel. Kiryas Chana David. This is where David HaMelech rests. This is his city. Chana David. Bo B'Shah Shahakol Yoidem Es HaTshuva L'Tainazu. Everybody knows the answer. The answer is that the Jewish people's connection to the land of Israel is a godly given right. Hamas Pareshes Ba'ascholis Pirush Rashi Ala Torah. The Rashi says it on the Torah. Kol ha'aretz shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The whole world is Hashem's. Hu bara, He created it. V'nosna la'yashe yashe be'einav. God gave the Torah to the one that He sees fit in His eyes. Nosna lanu, He gave it to us. Okay. Lamar b'hapela, the Rebbe says. It's a wonder. Hoya b'chlal zeh gam bedinois. There are even countries shedarkam li'ishtadel v'lasas kol ha'tolu b'hem l'manat tzedek v'ha'yosher ba'olam. Generally, these are people who now they're living in a state where they want to do what's right in the world. We're not talking about nations that are malicious, that are bad. Generally, they're they're good. Just what? Kvisharo, like we see, even they assisted to stop the aggression of Saddam, like we see. But when it comes to this particular aspect, their conduct is ba'oifen biltui ratzui, is in a manner that's not good, undesirable, b'yachas l'bnei Yisrael, when it comes to the Jewish people. In other words, the Rebbe seems to be implying that as the world progresses towards Mashiach, and the world becomes more humane, and more caring, and more conscious, it can at the same time use that as more anti-Semitic. See what I'm saying? The very push of becoming sensitive could be simultaneously go along with anti-Semitism. V'yesh loima hasbara b'zeh. What's the explanation? He says, Shamu'urizu, how can it be that this is happening dafka at a time when we're seeing nisim geluyim, open miracles? Is based on what we said earlier, that the order of the world is that first there is darkness, and then there comes light. First there's evening and then there's light. And it's understood. Don't in any way see this as a contradiction to my message, the Rebbe is saying, that Mashiach is coming. From this that you're seeing an anti-Semitic approach, this that you're seeing BDS, from this that you're seeing all this college animosity towards Israel and so on and so forth. What does it say? The Rebbe says in Tehillim, it says, Ulu'umim yehegu, and the nations talk rik. Rik means empty. They're speaking things that I have zero power. They're not going to be successful. Kivan, why? And this is the most important. Sheyoyshev b'shamayim yischak. Because the one that sits on high in heaven laughs. Hashem yilag lamoy. Hashem is another word of yilag. Hashem is making fun of them. You can do this. You can try, wish as you may, to try to stop me from getting back my home. You're going to be unsuccessful. Okay? And therefore the Jewish people shouldn't get impressed by this. You should stand with all your strength. Don't even talk about giving 1 inch of the land of Israel to compromise. This is not it. He says, and not only this, that we shouldn't be impacted by it, but rather this itself is misimane haga'ula. This is a sign, this itself is from the sign of the redemption. Because Chazal Darshan, the pasuk, the second pasuk in Tehillim, second chapter in Tehillim in Psalms, the sages say that this whole parak in Tehillim is referring to Melech HaMashiach. So therefore, don't be impressed. Fine. Okay, so now based on that idea, I would like to talk a little bit about this powerful campaign. In 1993, the Lubavitcher Rebbe had in 1992, in the winter of 1992, Chav Zayin Adar, the 27th day of Adar, the Rebbe suffered a stroke, which sent Chabad reeling, I would say. No one expected it, and no one saw it coming. 2 years later, in 1994, on the very same day on the calendar, 27th day of Adar, which is shocking, same day on the calendar, 2 years apart, the Rebbe suffered a second stroke. After the first stroke, even though the Rebbe could not talk regularly, but he would still be communicating with the Chassidim. He would come out on the porch and so on and so forth. It was communication. People asked all the millions of questions. He encouraged the singing. It was like amazing. I mean, amazing. It was very painful to watch. He couldn't speak and couldn't teach and all that. But at least after the second stroke, Rebbe was taken to the hospital, and it was like that. I don't know for about 3-4 months, whatever, until Gimel Tammuz, the third day of Tammuz, and that's it. And then Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe was nostalgic, and what that caused, obviously in Chabad, was disbelief. The reason it was disbelief was because it didn't match everything we've been hearing. It didn't match everything we've been hearing. Didn't fit everything we believed. Because I will share with you in the talks what the Rebbe spoke, in our next talk, shocking things what the Rebbe was saying. A lot of things. Let's leave it for the next class. I have to shock you in the next class, so let's leave that in the next class. But really, it was not planned. No one planned that was going to happen. At best, we thought that his stroke and all of that is all just an erev for a moment of he's going to stand up with the Shofar Shel Mashiach, take us all out of Golus, and that's going to happen any second. So when Gimel Tammuz happened, it really threw us all on the me, all of us. I mean, everybody was like off, and it was very difficult to digest. So as a result of that, people, to a certain degree, thought that the Rebbe wanted, he hoped, he was planning something. It didn't work out. The Eibishter, whatever. We didn't deserve, whatever. Let's put that in the back of our minds. We can study whatever the Rebbe said until 1990, ignore what he said from 1990 and forward, because we don't know what that means. And perhaps, maybe it was some kind of a himmelish thing. The Rebbe was seeing things up there in heaven, but it wasn't reality down here in the world. People had questions. And I think what happened, at least in most of Chabad, is let's kind of silence it. We don't know how to deal with it. And we'll just take Chabad back into the work of just spreading Yiddishkeit, which is all part of advancing Chabad towards Mashiach, advancing the world towards Mashiach. But Mashiach, the urgency of Mashiach, the whole idea that Mashiach is coming now, it kind of wore itself out. And of course there is, in Lubavitch itself, a staunch group that very strongly no, the Rebbe said, and so on and so forth, and he's without a shadow of a doubt Mashiach, and so on and so forth, and that's what happened, and that's what the world saw, and kind of like it fizzled out. What I want to say today is that nothing fizzled out. And that during this whole period of time of darkness that happened since 1994, this is all, I wish it wouldn't have happened, we daven it wouldn't have happened, but it's been predicted by Chazal, which I will share with you in the second class today. All of that is stated. But one thing I will want to say, the moment you have to realize is there's a lot of super forces that are beyond, super forces that we don't see, that are involved in what's happening in the world today. People are making decisions, but the energy behind things are powerful forces that are not physical. let me put it this way. This past Shabbos, we learned about the passing of Aaron HaKohen. And when Aaron HaKohen passed away on his yard site just 3 days ago, on Friday, Aleph of, when Aaron HaKohen passed away, the Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory that surrounded the Jewish people, left. And when the clouds of glory that surrounded the Jewish people left, it left the Jewish people vulnerable to attack. And at that moment, the enemies, which are Amalek, and those who want to stop the Jewish people from entering into the land and building Hashem Yimloch La'olam Vad, establishing the divine kingdom and building a Beis HaMikdash, felt that the door opened up for them. And that's why they staged a war against, and it says a lot of Jews got scared and they ran back. Moshe had to send, Rashi says a lot of Jews got so scared when Amalek came to attack them. The Amalekim were dressed like Canaanim, which, by the way, fits in this war. I'm just hitting you right now. See, I knew the Chiddush is going to come today. It just occurred to me right now. The fight of the Klippa that's coming to fight now against holiness, to stop Mashiach, dresses itself in piety. It's dressed in piety. Israel is horrible because they're mean and boop, boop, boop. And this guy is a monster. Everything that's being fought against the powers of Mashiach in the world are all camouflaged in piety. When Aaron HaKohen died, that's my chiddush I had now, is that when Aaron HaKohen died, Amalek came to fight. But Amalek dressed itself like the Canaanim, not like Amalek. They came masqueraded. Why? Because the Jews shouldn't know who to pray for. That's what it says. So they came to confuse them. So they camouflaged. But why did they come? Because Aaron passed away. And what happened to the Jewish people after Aaron passed away? Many of the Jewish people got scared and turned back into the desert. They went back 8 campments. And Moshe Rabbeinu had to send Shevet Levi to go get them back. And a war broke out between the Leviim and those who returned, who were this, and a lot of them died. It was a sad situation until they were able to get these Jews back and from getting scared and running away. When Gimel Tammuz happened, and the defender of Israel, the person standing strongly and fighting the wars of the Jewish people to the world, and again, it was very, very known to the world. It was publicized everywhere that Chabad seeing him as the Mashiach and so on and so forth. The moment that kind of like, that hope or that wish that looked like it was at a certain point, it seemed to have been broken, the forces of Klippa in the world gathered together for a last and final push to stop the redemption. And that's the story of the world from 1992, we can say, until 2016. And to a certain degree, even today, but things changed in 2016. And let me tell you, let's go quickly through what happened. What happened is as follows. Number one, in Israel, Bill Clinton started putting tremendous pressure. Was at that time, it even started earlier in 1992 already, is when they decided on this horrific idea called Oslo. And the idea that the Rebbe warned against every time, that if you think you're going to get peace by compromising on Eretz Yisrael and giving Arabs pieces of your land, all you're going to get, God forbid, is a lot of extra bloodshed. A lot of unnecessary bloodshed. Just the mere fact that you're talking about it is creating an appetite, a lust for blood. And the Rebbe, interesting, the Rebbe would always say that it's going to cost a lot of death on both sides, to the Jews and to the Arabs. Because it's unnecessary. It's not going to work. Well, they didn't want to listen. And they decided to make a handshake with Arafat and Rabin, who won then the Nobel Peace Prize, and Rabin shook hands and they kissed and everything was beautiful. It looked like we're going to live happily ever after. We've finally achieved the unachievable. We're going to live with our Arab brothers, cousins, in peace and in harmony. So this past summer I was in Israel, and I stayed in, not this summer, last year, exactly a year ago, I stayed in someone's house. Anybody know Pamela in the Old City? She's really, really great. So I stayed by her. What's her husband's name? Abba and Pamela. I stayed by them, and then we were farbringing at the Friday night till who knows what time. 3 o'clock in the morning, we went down to where we were staying. We were at our room, and I found, and then there was 2 girls over there that were talking to me, my wife. And then I found the book over there that had like all the pictures from the Jerusalem Post. From the day the Jerusalem Post started, from the first day, all the headlines. It had all the headlines of the Jerusalem Post. At that time, it was called the Palestine Post. And I'm looking through the pages. And you see the history of Jews in Israel. You're basically in pictures. You don't even have to read it. You see what's going on. And from time to time, they're reporting on a terrorist attack. And there were many attacks. But the terrorist attacks that were happening until 1990 were sporadic. They were spread out at intervals. Suddenly, you see the most beautiful pictures. Rabin with Bill Clinton standing, Arafat is shaking hands, the ultimate handshake, the beautiful moment that everybody's been waiting for. And I'm reading the newspapers, what this guy said and that guy said. A new dawn has come to the world that we've never believed we would live to see peace and harmony and love. This is unbelievable. This is beautiful. Okay, stay put. I start turning the pages, and believe me, I've never seen such blood-splattered pages in my life. In the next 30 pages that were coming, one after another. Jerusalem bus, Sabaro restaurant, Netanya Seder, Tel Aviv disco, one after another. Every day we're watching suicide bombers. This was the great peace that they promised. That this would be a love, a time of peace and harmony. It brought the total opposite. Today's days you can see in Israel that anybody who's thinking Oslo ideas is very unpopular. The two parties today in Israel is right, Netanyahu, and center. Blue and white is center, with Ganzen. Those that still have Rabin's dream of La La Land, those who have the dream to make peace with the Arabs by giving land and so on, and land for peace, are a minority of a minority, and they're laughed at by most of the country. Basically, it's trial and error. We've seen it, we've tried it, it doesn't work, it only brings calamity after calamity. That was the first darkness. Now, obviously, to try to push that, as again, is the beginning. They didn't even talk about Jerusalem then. Jerusalem was going to be discussed later, at least, but that was obviously their intention. Now, in addition to that, global terrorism started, and 9/11 happened, and we've watched the horrors. Remember when we used to get on a plane and how quick and easy it was to get on a plane? Today it became so normal that you have to take off your shoes and you have to stand online, you go through all this security business. It didn't have any of that. Right? Global terrorism with 9/11 and all that, Al-Qaeda and all that. And then suddenly the growth of ISIS. The most murderous, vicious, vile, despicable evil. I mean, Baruch Hashem, we haven't been seeing those videos. They were sending out those videos, literally of them cutting off people's heads. It was horrible. And this is what the world was watching. Okay, this is what was spreading across. Horrible. In addition to that, there seemed to be, and let's add to that, the general atmosphere in the world became very, very anti-Israel. More and more and more. The BDS movement. And it was kind of, you can say, a coalition of the European Union, the Europeans, the UN, right? The UN, the left in the United States, the colleges. And what was the theme? What was the most important element on the agenda was the Israeli occupation. And you think about it, it really doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you look at all the problems that there, Baruch Hashem, we spoke earlier, there's much less problems today than there were years ago. But there's still problems. Syria has been involved in a civil war where millions of people, or hundreds of thousands of people, in the best estimate, were murdered. Children were horrible human abuse. Horrible human, forget about North Korea, but and human abuses in other countries, like horrible, horrible. And yet, in Africa and so many, Sudan, it doesn't enrage, it doesn't anger. The youth, college kids in Berkeley aren't protesting, aren't fighting for this, but for the horrific treatment of the Palestinians, who usually, when they're not bothering us and we don't have to close down the supplies going in, and we let them, they're living actually as good as Arabs live in their countries, and probably much better than that. But I'm not going into the fact that it's so important to them. Listen, the fact that it's so deeply embedded in them is a sign that this is something spiritual. When in the subconscious of humanity there is a recognition and understanding that Moshiach is coming. They don't know this in a conscious way, but in a subconscious way, that the temple is going to be built and Moshiach is coming and God's light is going to fill the entire world. There is that which is left over, or let me put it in simple words, the Satan, powers of unholiness, of impurity, is going to fight it. And how is he going to fight it? By creating a massive anti-Israel movement. And that became very, very strong. In addition to that, you have the general ideas of this entire coalition is not just against the Jewish people, it's against God in general. It's to basically eradicate God from the world. It's eradicate the Eibishter. That's what they want. They can't stand the mention of God. They can't stand the idea of divine morals. Mankind gets to choose whatever you want to do, and if that means living antithetical to the basic moral code that Hashem has given to humanity in terms of value and family life. Okay, what's at the head of the agenda? The head of the agenda is the destruction of marriage. Basically, you can marry whatever. The LG, what is it called? The LGBT movement, the abortion. Yeah, that's right. They were in the days just in 2014, 2015, they were enforcing gender-neutral restrooms everywhere. So you can decide who you are, what you are. These are things that are fundamentally eradicating the basic structure of life that God created and that Hashem wants us to live by. Of course, it's all in the name of non-judgmental and caring and being open-minded and being accepting of everybody. Yeah, but it's again, I'm not arguing this from a humanistic place. I'm arguing this from a place of Torah and mitzvahs. I'm talking to Jews. I'm talking about what we know what God wants. And that's definitely not what the Eibishter wants. It's against the Zaya Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. It's a destruction of marriage. It's a destruction of the way God, the morality of God wants. And this is all part of the opposite of Mashiach's world. And just a few weeks ago when they tried to take off, there were many lawsuits where they tried to take off In God We Trust from the dollar. They tried to take it off from every mention wherever it is. And even in Congress, a few weeks ago, they had swearing in someone. I know the video was going around. They were swearing in, someone had to take an oath, and usually the taking of an oath involves saying that I'm under perjury and under whatever, I don't know exactly the Lashon. What is it? What? So help me God. Oh, that's what it is. So help me God. That's the phrase. So when the guy administered the oath, he left out, so help me God. And I think the Republican nominee, the one sitting over there, objected, and he said, I think you left out part of the oath. And they said, well, they choose not to say it. So he says, but maybe we should administer the oath again, and maybe those who don't want to don't have to, but those who don't want to say it properly should be able to say it. And sadly, the Jewish fellow overseeing the whole thing, I don't want to say Lashon Hara, got very annoyed and very upset and said, no, we can't. He voted it down and shut the guy up because he's not the Speaker of the House, but he's the, I don't know what, whatever. And he silenced it. In other words, to uproot the name of Hashem, basically uprooting, it's an atheistic, at the root of this whole movement is atheism. I'm not saying there aren't any religious people that have sensitivities and therefore are beliefs on, but the root of it, the thrust of it, is inherent, is very much atheistic. And let's be very clear, I'm not saying that on the right side, everything that is there is kosher and holy and godly. We've seen the horror and the utter viciousness and destructiveness on the extreme right as well. But in terms of the general movement, it's moving so far to the left, and so far anti-God, and at the center of it is anti-Israel. And it reached its epitome and its peak in the Obama years. When Obama became president, the first time, the United States was always pretty supportive of Israel, big supportive of Israel in everything. And suddenly that changed. And the Obama administration, Obama really did not, they say he didn't like Netanyahu, but he generally was not such a good friend of the Jews. And we all know that. You gotta be silly to argue anything else. And to reach its peak was the Iran deal. The Iran deal put the Jewish people in the land of Israel in serious danger. We're talking about 6 million Jews who are living now in Eretz HaKodesh, in the Holy Land of Israel, are literally sakonis nefashos, because if Chas v'Shalom, the Iranians would have it their way, because as I mentioned many times, I don't want to review it now, I'm just going to say one thing. If it was so good for the Jews, why didn't Netanyahu embrace it? Why didn't the general Shin Bet, why weren't they for it? Why wasn't the Israeli government for it? They weren't, because it was not good for the Jews. Because even if it would curb, let's say they would curb the Iranians from making, from continuing to enrich uranium, let's say they would curb that, it was only a limitation for a couple of years. 7 years or 10 years or whatever it is. That doesn't take much time. And even during that time, they weren't inspecting all the installations. They were given limitations of what they can inspect. The military places, they couldn't, and it was all proven 2 years ago when Netanyahu came back with the evidence. A miracle happened. The Israelis had a miracle almost as, they say, on the same level as in Entebbe, that they were able to go in there. It's one of the miracles of the Geula. They were able to go in there and steal all that material and bring it to Israel. And that happened actually just a few months before Trump had to make his decision. And he revealed it publicly a week before. But it was before Trump had to make his decision if he's going to continue respecting the Iran deal or not respecting the Iran. When you realize that Iranian deal was literally putting in life, I mentioned this in another class, that someone again, this is like old stuff, and I forgot, and I didn't really look up all the names. This person came to see Obama, and they discussed this, and he said to him, what's going to be with this, if eventually Iran gets a nuclear thing, what's going to happen? Or a nuclear warhead. So Obama said, "Don't worry, we'll have Israel's back." So he says, "Yeah, but and if God forbid they'll strike, then we'll strike back." So he said, "But he says the first strike can kill already 200,000 Jews." So Obama shrugged his shoulders. So the idea, the notion, but really, let's really understand it. At the bottom of it is a powerful fight against holiness. What did Obama do days before he left office? Literally, his last thing. Even if he can present himself kind of as a chilled guy who's just impartial, who's unbiased and is right down the center, and he's not influenced by the Israeli lobbyists, but he's being fair in the whole thing. Moments before, or days before he left office, he, for the first time, allowed the UN resolution to pass, which basically gives legitimacy to those who argue and say that basically when you're going in the old city, you're walking on it's illegal land, and when you go to the Western Wall, you're going there illegally. That's huge. To give that legitimacy, to allow that to pass. Also, the last act that he did, the last day, he sent a huge amount of money to the Palestinians and sent the Iranians, we're talking about. We're talking about a horror. All of this was part of in my opinion, again, based on what it seems like the Rebbe is saying, and I think it's clear to anybody. I don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. That this is a clear war against Mashiach. This is a war to stop the final geula from taking place. In every aspect of existence, it was focused and directed against the furtherance of Kedusha and holiness, the Eibishter, Beis HaMikdash, a recognition of Hashem, a keeping of a moral code regarding family life. Abortion is also a problem according to Torah. That's not simple. It's not the same like in the Christian world, but it's not so simple. As in Judaism, this form is more leniency than in the Christian. But general, this open license of abortion is literally bloody murder of millions and millions, maybe millions of innocent children that didn't get a chance to be born. This is a really, really, really horrible, horrific situation. And this is against God and against holiness and against Yiddish. With all the explanations that some sophisticated people try to argue, bottom line, it's Baba Mises. Bottom line, anybody that has a belief in Torah and in Yiddishkeit and in the sanctity of life and so on and so forth realizes that this is not kosher. Not kosher. Fine. What happened? So as I mentioned earlier in Tehillim, it says, the Eibishter laughs. The Eibishter laughs. And what's the content? As I mentioned in the other class, the Eibishter's laughing. The Eibishter laughs because the Eibishter says, what do you think? I have chosen for myself one country, one small little hilltop that we read about before, and that's my house. Ki Yaakov bachal loika, that Yaakov, the Jewish people, God says, I have chosen Israel, Yisroel l'skolasai, I've chosen the Jewish people to be my cherished nation, to my cherished people, and you want to take that away from me? You want to take away my home? You want to block me from having my dream home when I'm about to take it and about to settle in? So you think it's going to work? Hashem laughs. Hashem heifir atzas goyim. The Eibishter nullifies the council of nations. Now, by the way, the Zohar predicts on the pasuk Lama Rakshu Goyim. The Zohar says that right before Mashiach comes, the nations in the world will all gather against Jerusalem. That's what he says. They'll all gather against Jerusalem. And then the Zohar and the Ramak, Ramosha Kardovo. It's a shame. I've been looking for this Ramak for the past few years. I had it at the time when this happened. Someone sent it to me, and I can't find it. So if anybody knows where this is, anybody that's listening would know where this is, can please send it to me. Where the Ramak, Ramosha Kardovo, the great Kabbalist, explains that when it says the nations are going to come against Jerusalem, it does not mean a physical war. It does not mean a physical war. It means that they are going to come ba'atzas shalom. They're going to come with a council of peace. They're going to try to force a peace on the Jewish people that will include relinquishing the hold on Yerushalayim. Now, if you remember, this happened exactly in January of 2016. In January of 2016, days before Donald Trump became president, there was a conference in France on Jerusalem. Go look it up. You know that? A conference on Jerusalem. And it says, read about it, 70 nations. It's amazing. In Judaism, there are 70 nations. But if you look in today's, how do you call it? What? Today's map, there's more than 70 nations. We don't call it. But in that story, you'll read about it. It says 70 nations gathered in Paris, deciding what actions to take on Jerusalem. But the whole thing didn't work out. It didn't work out because the unexpected happened. And the unexpected that happened, that the whole world was surprised, that caught the world by surprise. It was not going along with the official plans that have been where the world was marching towards, was that obviously the first woman president would be president after Barack Obama. We had our first black president, and then it's going to be our first woman. The one thing that was never going to happen is that person who has zero credentials for being a president, that person who shoots off from his mouth all kinds of things, incredibly insults every single person and every single minority and every single everybody. I mean, out of how no one would have thought it. If you look, go back to YouTube, look up the news anchors making fun of Donald Trump when he began his nomination. How they're laughing at him, how they're saying it's so ridiculous, how it's never going to happen. You have Obama laughing. They're all laughing as if it's a joke. They didn't treat it even as a serious threat. It was such a joke. It was so impossible for it to happen. And that's why you see it's the hand of God. That's where you see it. This is divine. The Eibishter threw the world in such a spin, because when it says Hashem is laughing, to me it's clear that the laughter is Donald Trump. Because he laughed, he made fun, he made a mockery. He said, you think you're going to take it away? I'm going to show you something that you won't believe it. And that's what happened. It happened so strangely. And it was so much in disbelief that they've been investigating it for the last 3 years. And that lemon that's trying to squeeze it, and already you think you can't squeeze anything out of it anymore. It's already all squeezed out. Everything you can squeeze out of that Russian collusion. It's over, but they can't leave go of it. They're trying to beat that dead horse again and again and again. And the reason why they want to so delegitimize it, the reason why they don't want to add him office. They can't even wait till 2020. They want to undo it from the beginning, is because it's a fight against, there is something spiritual over here. If it wouldn't be spiritual, they wouldn't have that animosity. In a sense, they hate him with the same hatred that people hate the Jews. Do you realize that? Why? Because it's a hate. Now, I am not saying he's a holy man. I'm not saying he's a refined human being. But what I am saying is that he's part of God's plan to disrupt a destruction, the coming of Mashiach. That's for sure. And the way I see him is that he's a klipa buster. A klipa buster, meaning that's what his job is. His job is to break that which is unholy in the world that's blocking. And the only one who could do it is someone like him, who couldn't care less what the media will say. Every half-normal human being would never be able to do it. Because everybody would buckle under the incredible pressure. Everybody. Now, I don't want Donald Trump, if you're listening to this, I love you, and I love what you're doing. But this is part of your shtick. This is part of what makes you so unique, is that you are who you are, right? You're not the most refined human being. You are Donald Trump. And because that's the only way you can do what you're doing. He can only, you never know today's days who can be listening to what, right? The idea is that it's precisely his coarseness and his crassness that enables him to stand up. Because here's the rule. Here's what the sages say. The sages say, "Minei ubei shada beinagra," that the Eibishter breaks the klipa from the klipa itself. That the Eibishter, how do you chop down the forest? From the tree, from the forest itself, you create the handle of the axe to break down the axe. So you need a klipa to destroy klipa. So he's not a entity of holiness or refinement. And that's what I think bothers so much Jews. And that's why Jews have such a hard time. Because Jews are looking for a role model. They're looking for a refined human being. Show a little empathy, show a little classiness, be a mensch. Come on, the guy can't take his hands off his Twitter thing. And every day he says, and many times they're great, many times they're utterly stupid things. And yet, in his own way, some people say it's clever beyond clever. We'll wonder about that in 30 years from now. The one thing is for sure, that in the last few weeks, he took the spotlight away from all the Democratic candidates. It doesn't give them any airtime, because the whole time it's about him. He's created controversy after controversy. Every single week he says something else that's, you would think that he says like the stupidest thing he could ever have said, or like to get people upset, and he outdoes himself every single week, upsets the entire country, but he's the one who's calling, he's narrating the whole thing. These guys, they don't even have the spotlight. They can't even get what they want because he's teasing them, pulling them wherever he wants. It's really insane what's happening. I'm not getting into the political aspect of it, but the idea that he became president, and shockingly, I'm not saying I agree with his policies, that's not the issue. Many of his policies that he promised the United States, even though he loves talking about his record, he loves talking about he promised, and he did, and he delivered in terms of the economy, unbelievable. He delivered, but certain things that he promised, that he based his entire thing was that he was going to build the wall. Bottom line, say as much as you want, there is no wall yet. Mexico is stopping the migrants. This is happening. There is no wall. Many of the other things I'm not gonna that he did want to do, thought he didn't get done. He repealed Obamacare. At this point, some of it was taken, but not. He didn't accomplish many of the things he said he would do. But everything when it comes to Israel, his record is unbelievable. It's almost like, and this is the way I see him, the longer hand of Moshiach. Yodai Arichta of Melech HaMashiach. I mean, through him, Mashiach is getting spectacular things done in this world. And we will think about one after another what they were. When he announced that the embassy is moving to Jerusalem, it doesn't get past that. That's like unbelievable. That's recognizing Irshel, David. That's giving legitimacy to the Jewish people. And now we don't need his legitimacy in essence, but we do need it in terms of Mashiach means a world recognition in God, a world recognition in Hashem, and so the fact that he moved the embassy, which was something that was not done by all the presidents before him. Everybody said they were going to do it, but no one did it. Why? Because you knew it's impossible to do. What he did was literally impossible because everybody predicted World War III would break out when someone would do that. And he did it, and it didn't happen because the Klippa is a bunch of hot air. It's not real. He can go technically and throw the Arabs out of that mosque and build the Beis HaMikdash, and you know what? There won't be World III. Okay, because everybody's afraid of the United States, and I'll tell you another secret, they're afraid of Israel as well. He can go and build the Beis HaMikdash over there. But it's like this, they create such a, this will upset everybody, a few billion Muslims, and who knows what's going to happen. And everybody's terrified. And earlier presidents were scared. And he did that, okay? Now we're going to speak about the dates of when he did that, but we're going to get to that soon. The other thing it did for us is that he freed Rubashkin, which was huge, which was a terrible travesty of justice, a terrible injustice against and it was one of his first acts of clemency that he gave. It wasn't clemency, whatever they call it, that he extended to him. That was huge. The fact that he cut off, that he shut down, or that he cut off UNRWA and the United States support for, which now is being exposed for their amount of corruption that they had. So the fact that he kicked the Palestinians out of Washington, the fact that he pulled out of the Iran deal, and he is suffocating the Iranians. He's literally took them. They were already so high up. They have made it they were the ones calling the shots. They were having the entire world coming. Imagine 7 world powers were begging the Iranians to make peace. They were the ones who were calling the conditions. He took these Iranians and literally choking them. They're suffocating. The reason they wanted a military conflict was hopefully they can get themselves out. They were trying to get it going a few months ago. Also in the hands of Hashem that he didn't fall for their bait, but you see that he's literally destroyed. These are the enemies of God. These are the ultimate threat to the Jewish people. This is unbelievable. This is transformation. This is his hapcha. And Who's doing it? So I want to share with you something very, very important, which I think will add, because whatever I said till now, I mean, is without the deeper knowledge. It's just the general theme and general that everybody can see and understand. But let's take this a little deeper and appreciate what's the inner core of what's happening. When the Rebbe spoke about Mashiach and Mashiach's light and Mashiach's true coming to the world, one of the things the Rebbe emphasized and the Rebbe very strongly spoke of is that in all the process of creation is a process of the world becoming more synchronized with God. That's the process. The world becoming synchronized with holiness. Godliness being revealed. So the Rebbe says that, and this is Chassidus, the Rebbe is not saying his own, I'm saying this is all being explained and earlier through all the Chassidus that we learned, is that godly light comes to the world in stages. First there's one level, a lesser level of godly revelation, then there's a greater level, a deeper level of godly revelation, and then there's even a deeper level of godly revelation. For example, the Avos had a very minuscule godly revelation. By Matan Torah, we had a much greater godly revelation. And then the Beis HaMikdash, even a greater godly revelation. And in some ways, Chassidus explains the second Beis HaMikdash had even a certain deeper godliness than the first Beis HaMikdash, and so on and so forth. The deepest and highest divine revelation, obviously, is Mashiach. But the Rebbe explains that the Chiddush, the real novelty of Mashiach, is that Mashiach is not a divine revelation. Mashiach brings the essence of God to be manifest and revealed in the world. Not a godly light, but the Eibishter himself, God's very essence, is revealed in the world in the day. That's the idea that Hashem wanted to have a home in this world. God wanted to have a home. A home is where you don't project. Everywhere else in every other environment, you project yourself with a certain image. You're not yourself. You go on a bus, you're projecting yourself as a passenger. You're going into a restaurant, you project yourself with a certain mannerism as a customer. When you're in shopping, when you're at work, you have a certain professionalism. The beauty of coming home is you can be yourself. So when it says that God wants to have a home in this world, it means that God wants to just be himself. That means not any of his external lights, but his true essence is revealed. When the essence of Hashem is revealed, when the essence of God is revealed, the Rebbe says an amazing thing happens. Since the essence of God, since the essence of Hashem is the essence of everything, because everything emanates, everything comes from the essence of God, even that which is the most, this is the key, and I think this is the key to the understanding of everything that's happening right now. Since the essence of Hashem is the essence of everything, so what happens is that the most crass and coarse, unsensitive entities in creation fall in sync with God, become synchronized with God. In other words, until the actual revelation of Mashiach, it is divine stimulation that stimulates holiness. There is godly revelation. Godly revelation is a stimulator. Now, what can be stimulated? Only that which is stimulatable. Follow? So let me explain this just in other words. Every creature and every being has a spark of God at the core of it. That's called Nitzutze Kedusha, sparks of holiness. And these sparks of holiness can sit, and they're really at the root, at the core. They're the energy that there is in everything in this world. And in Kabbalah and Chassidus, we learn that our job in Torah and Mitzvahs is to uncover these sparks, to extract these sparks, to reveal these sparks, to help them manifest, to draw out by breaking the shells, the klipa that are around them, and stimulate the spark. So it says there's various different levels of sparks. There are sparks that get excited. They're very easy excitable. For example, you have Gentiles that have a very strong interest in Judaism. That's because they have a spark that's not too buried, and it's very close, and therefore it's yearning to be connecting to holiness. And then you sometimes have tougher material. You have entities that are very, very stubborn and stuck. But in any cases, levels and levels. Then there are certain places where the spark of holiness is basically dead. And in those darknesses are extreme darkness. And those sparks are kind of unstimulatable. And therefore nothing will work to stimulate them. Until when? Until the essence of God is revealed. When the essence of the Eibishter is suddenly revealed, which is Mashiach, since he is the essence of everything, he doesn't stimulate things. Follow that? It doesn't become stimulated. It's not that the creature or being becomes inspired. It just I think the best word, it just clicks. It synchronizes with the divine will. So when the coarsest of the coarse synchronizes with God, what's Mashiach's formula? When the coarsest of the coarse becomes synchronized with God's will, equals Mashiach. Follow? So the Rebbe says an interesting idea. He says in a talk, and I'll tell you which talk it is. It's more than one talk, but it's mainly two sources to this. One of them is in Parshas Vayeshev, in the winter of Parshas Vayeshev, 1992, Tafshin Nun Beis. And the second one is in a Chassidic discourse for Yutes Kislev. A Chassidic discourse is for Yutes Kislev that the Rebbe handed out. He said it in 1969, Tafshin Chavtes, but he edited it and gave it out to the Chassidim to study and to learn the edited version in 1991 on Yutes Kislev. Now, this is very significant. It's the last mimer the Rebbe gave us for Yutes Kislev. Now, if anybody knows about Yutes Kislev is the Yom Tov of Chassidism. This is when the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, was in jail for spreading Chassidus. On this day, he was given the green light that he can continue spreading Chassidus to the world. So in these two places, the Rebbe develops this idea. And the Rebbe, first let me address how it's explained in the Sikha of and this is just mind-blowing, because if you get this and then you take a look, you see, wow, this is crazy. This is mamash what's happening. So the Rebbe was then talking about, he spent an entire Farbrengen talking about France. France, the country France. And the Rebbe was saying that there are various different levels of pure. We're here in this world, the Jewish people, the Rebbe says, were sent into the diaspora to elevate the sparks of the entire world. So we go from country to country. And the Rebbe says for the first greater part of our Golus history, we were hovering around countries that are closer to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, we were around closer Babylon. We were in Babylonia. We were in we were in Morocco. We weren't so far. We were closer to the land of Israel. Spiritually, that means that these countries are not so antithetical to holiness. Then, in the later part of history, he says the closer we get to Mashiach, the more outspread the Jewish people, the more the Jews spread everywhere, to even the farthest countries, in order to elevate and to purify even the darkest places. Now he says one place that was always considered a very rough and inconquerable klippa, a very rough and inconquerable, stubborn type of a klippa that was very resistant to Kedusha. And therefore, anybody that would try to go there would get sucked into a black hole. I'm paraphrasing, it doesn't say exactly those words. And that is France and Paris. Because the French were the ones who began the French Revolution, Napoleon, even though it was in a sense an advance for humanity, but it was really an atheistic, it was there to throw off the yoke of the kings, of the monarchs, but including in overthrowing the yoke of the monarchs, it was also overthrowing God's authority. It's the first time man was trying to liberate himself from God. And the Rebbe points out strongly, not in that talk, but it's different, it's different than the American Revolution. The American Revolution was faith-based. We're given rights by God. That's why the rights are rights. The foundation that's why America's foundation is pure. The French foundation was very impure. And the Rebbe said, therefore, the Alter Rebbe, his predecessor, the first Chabad Rebbe, was very afraid of France. The Alter Rebbe was very against Napoleon. He himself fought spiritually and even had his Chassidim involved in helping the Russians against, and he promised his sons that Russia will win. That's, by the way, one of the proofs the Rebbe gives when he's giving that his predecessors were prophets. He talks about the nevuas. He brings from his grandfather, the Tzemach Tzedek, that says about the Alter Rebbe that he actually was so precise in every prediction that he gave, down to the hair. So the Rebbe, because France was like the darkest place, the Rebbe says, as we're getting closer to Mashiach, we see that we began the purification of France. The Rebbe spent an entire sikha then saying that if you want to see how the world is ready for Mashiach, take a look how Yiddishkeit has spread in France. Now, the Rebbe was not talking about the hostilities of the animosity, the anti-Semitism of France. The Rebbe was just talking about the fact that a place that was considered so not kosher, so inhospitable to observance, in 1990, there were yeshivas and chedarim and communities, and there were thousands upon thousands of Baalei Tshuva coming from France. The Rebbe says, you know what happened? That's the transformation of the last frontier. And when we finished, and we done, the Rebbe says, we finished purifying the lowest place. And hear this, and now I'm coming to the point. He says that the word tsarfas, in Hebrew, France, is tsarfas, and it's mentioned in the Navi, not Chavakuk, the one who, Ovadia, and Ovadia talks about Tsarfas. Tsarfas is France. He says the word Tsarfas comes from the word Tziruf. Tziruf means to refine. And that's to indicate that once we refine France, we've refined the lowest of the low. We've done. The Birur of France is the last Birur what we need to do. And then the Rebbe spoke of an interesting thing. He says the national anthem of the French, which is dun 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 dun. The Rebbe says, and the proof to that is, he says that song, which was actually introduced during the Napoleon's days, was adapted by Chassidim, and Chassidim sing that song to the words Ha'aderes ve'amuna l'chayo elamim. And when Chassidim started, and an interesting thing the Rebbe pointed out, but if I bring it, that when Chassidim sing, and the Rebbe would always sing the song, Ha'aderes ve'amuna l'chayo elamim. In other words, instead of the atheistic foundations of war against God, we're singing the real beauty and the real greatness, l'chayo elamim, is to the one who lives on eternity. Fine. The Rebbe said an interesting thing. He says that after Chassidim started singing the song, the French went and altered the song. Suddenly, a few months or weeks later, not exactly, the French decided to change. They changed the rhythm of the song. They made it, I think, faster or whatever. So the Rebbe says, why did they change it? So he says, old Chassidim say, which whenever the Rebbe says old Chassidim, it generally means himself. So the Rebbe says, old Chassidim say, because who would know this? He says, because the ministering angel above felt that they took away his spark. The niggin is his soul. That the neshama of France was already pulled out. The spark was pulled out and elevated into holiness. And once it's elevated into holiness, but the Rebbe says, but let's understand something. The spark that's in France is so coarse, meaning it's buried so deeply. It's one of those sparks that we spoke about earlier that is unstimulatable. It's not stimulatable. The French are not spiritually conducive to be inspired towards holiness. So how did it transform? The Rebbe says, because that's Mashiach already. The Gilui of Mashiach only, which is the essence of God, is able to shake France. It's a sikha, you can learn it. Wait. And he says, how do you see that? He says, the same word tsarfas, has a word called tsarfas. If you rearrange the letters, you get the word paratzta. Tsarfas, rearrange the letters, same letters, tav, pei, reish, tzadik. You reign with, and from the famous song, Ufaratzta, right? Ufaratzta, you will blast forth, Yama, Vakedma, west and east, Tzafona, Vanegba, north and south. You will blast, Bli Gvul, Ein Sof. Now that's Mashiach already. Paratzta, who's the father of Uparatzta? Paratzta, without limitations, without boundaries, Ein Sof. The father of that really comes from a son of Yehuda, who's the grandfather of Mashiach, whose name is Peretz. When Peretz was born, his brother was going out before him. Then his brother pulled his hand back, and from behind he came back to be the winner, and his mother said, or whoever was there said, Ma paratzta lecha peretz. How did you blast out? Paratzta means blasting energy that has no limitations and no boundaries. Why? That means there's no barriers. There isn't the possibility that you can say that godliness cannot come to this place. We said earlier that there are things that you can't stimulate. You can't. Nothing in the world, no amount of convincing, of reasoning, of light, of inspiration can inspire the spark. If no one can inspire it, how will it change? How will the lowest of the low change? But if it's not changing, it means that God has a barrier, that there's a certain place that's not letting God in. So the only way it can change, the power of ufaratzta, hear this, and here's the secret of everything today. The power of ufaratzta is the power of the essence of God. Only the essence of the Eibishter, the essence of Hashem, is totally limitless, that it could transform the lowest of the low. How? Going back to what I said before, not through inspiration, but that even the lowest of the low synchronizes with God's will. And that's the power to transform the most rogue, the most distant, the most ungodliest of things. Fine. Let's take it one more step. And the Rebbe says, so where did France get transformed from? Where did the power come from? From the Chabad Shluchim, the Rebbe says, that are in France, that built up unbelievable and taught Chassidus and Yeshivos and unbelievable. And he says, and where do they get their inspiration from? From a place called 770. Everybody knows Chabad headquarters 770. The Rebbe says 770 is Gematria Ufaratzta. Pei, Reish, Tzadik, Tov is Gematria 770. So the Rebbe says, because from 770 is the Gilui, is the revelation of the essence of God is being revealed through here, through the teachings of Chassidus. The teachings of Chassidus is already the teachings of Mashiach, which is the teachings of the essence of the Eibishter, and only through Paratzta of 770, which are the same letters of Tsarfas, can France, which is the lowest of the low, be transformed. So, and the Rebbe says, to add to that, just one more thing, the number 770 has another meaning. Besides it indicating the essence of God, it also indicates time and space. Because when you look at time and space, it's all the number 7. Space, 6 directions and the center. Time, 6 days of the week, and Shabbos, number 7. 7 times 7, Shemitah, everything works in systems of 7. And we know 7 is, there are 7 nations who live in the land of Eretz Yisroel. There are 70 nations according to Torah. There are 7 heavens, 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 musical notes. Nature is 7. Purification of nature and all of its details and subcategories, the Rebbe says, is 7, because in order for a number to be complete, every number is complete when it's times 10. So 70 is the completion of the number 7. 700 is 10 times 70. So 770, the Rebbe says, means the perfection of purification of the entire globe of all of time and space. And the way you correct and fix all of time and space is when you go to the lowest point, and when you hit the lowest point, from the lowest point you unleash the potency of the deepest of the deep and the highest of the high, which is God's very essence, which is also at the root of paratzta, the power of atzmos, of the essence of God, which is all related to the number 770. And the Rebbe is clearly talking about his headquarters, 770, where Chassidus goes out from, in which the biggest global network to save the Jewish people, to reach out, to do mitzvahs with every Jew, to prepare the Giyul and so on. But the secret of it is that which is uninspirable, it's the last of the 770, meaning it's the last point in time and space that's uninspirable, where it can only be affected by the essence of Hashem being revealed. And the Rebbe, the same idea, now I have to say this is incredible. The Rebbe says the same idea is really the concept of Yutes Kislev, the 19th of Kislev. Because the 19th of Kislev, when Chassidus is revealed, Then it's Chassidus is this essence of God. And he goes through in the Mimer, it's a very deep discourse. It's one of the really tough discourses to learn. We learned it, I have it online, but it's awesome. And in that discourse, he explains levels upon levels, the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu, Shlomo HaMelech, and eventually Mashiach. And how Mashiach is the highest revelation, and when he's revealed, everything in the world becomes holy and godly. Even that which, and it's all connected, as I said earlier, to the number 770. Now watch this. Hear this amazing thing. So in the year 2016, on November 9th, we had the elections. In the Hebrew calendar, it's not 2016, it's the year 5777. That means it's within the 10 years of 770. It's in this tikkun, the time of tikkun of the world, related to the number 770. But it's in the year 5777. Now, he won the stunning election. If we were to look for a human being that represents the spiritually uninspirable, Trump is a man of faith. He believes in God, and you ever hear him speak on the days of prayer, it's beautiful. He speaks about Hashem and how we're bringing God back in, and we're not afraid to mention God, and we say him, it's really... But he's not a person that you would expect to... You don't see in him the refinement necessary for spirituality. Let's just put it that way. That's not his department. Yeah. And if you take a look at the stuff he said, and before the election, the garbage they were dumping and stuff that he came out, we're not dealing with, in any way, a person that has any connection to any refinement. So we can say we're talking about that which is coarse, okay? Not in any insulting way, because I don't mean that. Actually, we need the lowest point now for the ultimate revelation, so it's not a bad thing, okay? So now, take a look. So he won the election in 2016. Now, by the way, how did he win the election? How did he win the election? All the polls were working against him. He won the election because 11 days before the election, his greatest enemy, probably, Comey, what's his first name, Comey? James Comey decided to open up an inquiry again because of a crazy story with the computer from Hillary's aide of the guy from New York, whatever his name was, who had his whole chazarai going on with this girl. And because of that, and they were investigating it, and there they found the emails, and they were going to investigate those emails. It happened 11 days before. And when they reopened the investigation, suddenly her polls plummeted, and he rose, okay? Now, for a Chabadnik, you don't have to explain the significance of number 11, which it's not for now. But it was 11 days before the election. It's just an interesting idea. And then, what's it called again? Okay, so then he wins the election. Right after he won the election, there was a lot of talk by the Electoral College that they're not going to officially give him their vote. It's the first time in history. Usually when you win, you win. There's nothing to talk about. But many people were saying that the Electoral College no one should give him their votes. In the end, they did give him their votes. He did win, because obviously that's what they have to do. But you understand, you're not officially president until the Electoral College votes you in. The general election is really nothing. I mean, it's everything, but it's really, legally, it's nothing. It's just a suggestion to the Electoral College of who you want the electoral people, who they should vote for. So legally, when did he officially really become president? First day of office is January 20th. But what is his legal rights to the presidency is when? When the Electoral College voted for him. The Electoral College voted for him on December 19th, 2016. Go to your Chabad.org and translate that date into Hebrew. What's the date in which the Electoral College voted for him, December 19, 2016. Yud Tes Kislev, the 19th of Kislev of the year Tavshin Ayin Zayin, 5777. It's when the sevens are all lined up, which 7 represents the coarsest of the coarse from the very bottom, synchronizing and transforming in it. Now, 1 year later, exactly on the 19th of Kislev, 1 year later, again, the 19th of Kislev strikes again. When did it strike this time? How did it strike? That's the day he announces that Jerusalem, the embassy is going to move, that the United States recognizes Yerushalayim as the ultimate. Again, it's all on the 19th. Over here it was the 18th of Kislev still, but when he was standing on the White House lawn making that announcement, in Jerusalem it was the 19th of Kislev. Where the Rebbe says that now this is all a remez, but it's so accurate, it's worked so well. How old was President Trump when he took office on January 20th? He was the oldest person to become president. Bernie thinks he'll beat that, or the other guy, what's his name, Biden. But he was, at that point, to become president, the oldest to become president. He was 70 years old, but he's not low energy, right? He's not low energy. He's so funny. Anyways, how old was he? He was 70 years old, 7 months and 7 days old. Isn't that cool? In the year 5777, and his transformation has to do with 770, as I told you earlier. The week before he became president, not 3 days before, his daughter and his son-in-law is publicized on New York television that they go to the Rebbe's Ohel, and they're davening over there for the outcome of this election. And again, this is made known across the world. This is really something. You can't ignore it. This is something big. The fact that, and then a few days later, when does he liberate Rubashkin? I'm trying to show that all these things you see, God is showing us his face. When does he liberate Rubashkin? On the last day of Hanukkah. The last day of Hanukkah, he liberates Rubashkin. When does he call the Golan Heights? When did he officially recognize the Golan Heights? On Purim. This year on Purim. Unbelievable. Dates are aligning, and there's more. I just don't have time to go through all of it, but there's more. Now I'd like to add to this something just stunning. Stunning, which I think that after what I will say now, this all becomes irrefutable. Absolutely irrefutable. So, when it comes to kosher and non-kosher, it's very hot. Is everybody hot? Or maybe I'm just so hot. Huh? So why is it so hot? Is that air on? Oh, this one is not on. Okay. Sorry. I thought it was on. Yeah. Let me do some Tanya with you for a moment. Let me do some Tanya with you for a moment. This is stunning. If you came just for the last 20 minutes, it was worth it, just for this. Huh? See? I'm doing whatever I can to keep the audience. I'm doing whatever I can to keep you here another 20 minutes. But this is really, really amazing. This process, Chevra, here. This process, because the next idea is going to hopefully explain all the parts that I didn't get to yet. In that I said, we'll talk about the squad, we'll talk about the elections in Israel. I mean, there's some stunning things. What else did I get to? I have a bunch of things over there. The Arab Spring. What else? David Friedman. Okay, it's all part of this thing. But let me add this amazing thing. We really need another 3 hours for this discussion, but okay. There's so much. This is just like a tip of the iceberg. But bear with me. So in Tanya, chapter 37, he's talking about in chapter 36 and in chapter 37. Shneir Zalman of Liadi is talking about. He's talking about the purpose of creation. And he says the purpose of creation is that God wants to have a home in this world. I mentioned that earlier. How are we going to get that this world should be a home for God? As I mentioned earlier, Hashem first created this world, especially after the sins of Adam and Chava and all of that, to be an antithesis to holiness. So how do we fix this world? We fix this world through Torah and mitzvahs. Okay? Bear with me. Through Torah and mitzvahs, we fix this world. How? So let me just give a general idea that he explains. He says like this. Our world, before we start doing Torah and mitzvahs, is a world that is filled with what we call klipa. Our world is filled with klipa. What does klipa mean? Klipa means shells. A peel. A peel covers on the fruit. There is a fruit. The peel is a cover. That means inherently everything is godly. There is a peel that covers. Our work in Torah and mitzvahs is to peel away the peel and extract the spark that's there, and as a result of that, uncover the godly content of every creature and every being and everything and make everything holy. But we are told as follows. There are certain dark entities in this world. They are called the three impure klipot. And these are elements that we can't elevate. They are pure evil. And they are literally not elevatable. They're not elevatable. And what time is it? It's 4:15 already? Yeah. Okay. I didn't realize. I thought we still have. Okay, I'm just going to then finish this very quickly. I'm going to make believe I'm going to finish this very quickly. Okay. Oh, but this is like, I can't believe I spent all that time not even getting to this. This is very important. Okay. So we'll take a little time from the next class, okay? But I'm going to, and then we'll, but bear with me. I want to ask your permission because I don't want to keep everybody longer. That I told you it's only going to be till 4 and we're supposed to have mincha. And you're okay? Okay. A few minutes. Okay. So there's two. Alter Rebbe says over there, based on the Arizal, that there's two types of klipot. There are what's called the three impure klippas. They're completely dark, very, very opaque. These are things that we can't elevate, unelevatable. Then there is the klipa that we need to elevate is the kosher part of the world, which is called klipas noga. Klipas noga means that which is in this world is a translucent klipa, and this is the klipa that we're able to elevate. And that's where really basically all of our Torah and mitzvahs, we take entities from klipas noga, we're taking the kosher stuff of the world, and we do a mitzvah with it. Or when we use things for the sake of holiness, we elevate the sparks. And as a result of that, we elevate all of creation. We purify, we elevate. This idea that there's different types of klipa is based on Yecheskel, where there it describes different, whatever. I'm not going to get into where the source of it is. But believe me, in Kabbalah, it's all over this idea. Okay? Anybody that learned Chassidus, Kabbalah knows this. There's three impure klipas. These are the dark elements of creation that are non-redeemable. And then there is an area where we're supposed to elevate called klipas noga. Now, klipas noga is an interesting kind of a klipa because it's a mixture of good and bad. It's the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra. It's a blend of good and evil that the klipas noga represents. And therefore, on the one hand, it's not such an evil klipa because it's elevatable. But on the other hand, it serves as the enabler of all the other klipot. Because, let's put it this way, God is the source of life. And therefore, everybody to be alive needs to receive from God. You need to receive from the Eibishter. Without the Eibishter, you can't live. God does not give energy directly to that which is directly antithetical to him, that opposes him. Lo yigur chara, evil cannot be in front of God's eyes. So therefore, what happens? Hashem gives life. That's where the middle klipa, the good and bad, the pariv klipa comes in. Being that it's a mediocre, it's a mixture of good and bad. So therefore, the way it works is like this. God gives his energy from Kedusha, from holiness. The energy flow goes into the good of Noga. The good of Noga mixes with the bad of Noga. Now, the bad of Noga is not really evil because it's the bad of Noga, so it's not real dark evil. From the bad of Noga, the energy flows to the three impure klipot completely. And that's how they survive. How will we get rid of evil from the world? How will evil ultimately die? So here's the idea. When the Jewish people complete fixing the klipa of Noga, what is our job? Sorting the good from the bad. By elevating the good of Noga, by taking all the mundane elements of the world, all elements that there is, talking about inanimate, plant, animal, human, any phenomenon, every idea, every concept, everything that exists, before we make it godly. If we use it for Kedusha, we elevate it. So by elevating it, what we're doing is we're separating the good from the bad. Now, when we separate the good from the bad, and for this we have to travel across the world, it's a process of thousands of years of a mitzvah observance. We're basically affecting every part of the world that's Noga, separating the good from the bad. Once the bad is separated from the good, then the bad dies. Then the three impure klipot, they automatically suffocate because their entire ability for them to receive energy is only from the middle, from the Noga. And that only works if Noga is mixed. Once Noga gets defined, good goes to one side and bad goes to the other side, then Noga remains lifeless. Then the bad of Noga dies, and then all the three impure klippas that are hanging on to it suffocate, collapse, and fall, and they're gone forever. They're lifeless. They have no energy. And then and that's the result of all of our mitzvahs. And therefore, once we do that, we've elevated all of creation. That's the concept, and of course there's a lot to explain about this and a lot to learn. Learn chapter 37 in Tanya, listen to a class or classes on it, you'll get the idea, but that's in general. So how do we know when we completed this work of separating the good and the bad? When we see this separation of the good and the bad in Noga become very, very clear. The good goes one way, the bad goes the other way, and then the klipa becomes so dead that ultimately it can collapse. It will implode upon himself. Okay. So now hold that thought once you know that. These four klipos, one of them called the three impure, one at the lower level, the three impure, and Noga are hinted to in the four non-kosher animals that are listed in Parshas, in Rabbeinu Bechai, in Parsha Shmini, when it says about the non-kosher animals, it lists four animals. One of them is the pig, the other one is the gumel, the camel, the rabbit, and the hare. These are four animals. Three of them, these are four animals that have one sign of kosher. The pig is the unique one. It's the only one that chews its cud, that has split hooves but doesn't chew its cud. So Rabbeinu Bechaya says, there's a medrash before we say that. There's a medrash that says that chazer is called chazer, pig is called pig, because asid lachazor, it's going to return. The pig is going to become kosher one day. One day will come, the pig will become kosher. So a lot of Jews get excited about that. One day. It's a good reason to want Mashiach, no? Imagine putting a nice piece of chazer in the cholent. So Rabbeinu Bechaya says, the Orach Chaim says, hold it, how can the Torah change? Torah says it's a mitzvah, how can it change? So the Orach Chaim says, the pig will change, not the Torah will change. The pig will change, because the pig will begin to chew its cud. That's the Orach Chaim. Rabbeinu Bechaya says it doesn't mean the physical pig. It means the koach of the pig, the power the pig that represents, which is Malchus Edom, which is the kingdom of Edom. They will do tshuva. Even though they destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, they're going to be the ones who are going to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Follow? Open. The very people who destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, these are the very people who are going to rebuild the temple. He says, who's going to build the Beis HaMikdash? An amazing thing. He says, Rabbeinu Bachaya, one of the great commentators, he says, Umazu, this nation, that means Rome, Edom, they destroyed it, they're going to build it, because Chazar is going to become kosher. Okay? So we have the idea that Chazar is compared to Edom, and Edom will become kosher. Now a little Kabbalah, back to the Kabbalistic idea I said before. Please, you just have to hold on to a few thoughts, and this is magnificent. In the writings of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, he brings from earlier Mikubalim, from the Ma'orei Or, who says that the four animals relate to the four klipot. The three of them that all chew their cud but don't have split hooves, those are the three unredeemable klipot, and therefore they're not fixable. And the pig, that's klipas noga. Okay? So remember what's klipas noga? Klipas noga is that center klipa. It's a eitz hadas, tov v'ra. It's got good and bad. It can go this way, it can go that way. And it's this is where we work and do the birur. This is where we work and do the rectification in this klipa. And at the end it becomes kosher, like Rabbeinu Bachaya says, that Edom, that the pig becomes kosher. Oh, and he continues and he says that the Tzemach Tzedek, he says that therefore that makes sense, that it fits, he says, with what Chazal say, that the four animals are the four exiles. The Jewish people have been through four exiles. Persia, Babylonia, we don't count Egypt. Persia, Babylonia, Greek, and then Rome. These are the four. Or maybe if we can leave Greece out because we were never gone out of our land and count Egypt. Whatever it is, we have an extra one, the Jews, an extra exile. We don't count it. Okay. I think that's not fair that we don't count it. I don't think it's an exile. How do we not count? But okay. In any case, so these are so there are four exiles, so the last one, which is the Rome, that's the one compared to the pig. And that's klipas noga, which means it needs to be elevated. In the end of days, it says it's going to be elevated. The pig is going to be elevated. That means that, what does it mean? That Edom is going to do tshuva. Edom is going to do tshuva. Who is Edom? So let's do this briefly. Who is Edom? Edom is Esav. And Esav is really, it was Rome. The Edomites actually, as the Rabbi Benel says, they lived next to Israel, but then that was their country. And then some of the Edomites made their way and founded, and they were the founding fathers of Rome. And then, so Rome is called Edom. So they destroyed. Later, the Romans translate into Christianity, right? They evolved into Christianity, even though first they persecuted the Christians, but then they evolved into the Christians. So the entire West is really Edom, which the offshoot of Edom later is the United States of America, is also part of Edom. All the nations of European descent, it's all part of that golus of Edom. But we know that our work is the elevation of klipas noga. So noga needs to be elevated. That means Esav needs to become a mensch, needs to be sublimated. Thank you. In other words, all the work that we do in Torah and mitzvahs that eventually has to result in a sublimation of the world really means the sublimation is realized in the sublimation of Edom. Edom is elevated. Where do we see Edom becoming sublimated? Where do we see Edom becoming more refined? Esav, who's been a murderer and a killer, who butchered our people for thousands of years through the Inquisition, through the Khmelnytsky, through the pogroms in Russia, through the bloodsheds of the Crusades, through the barbaric killings of the Roman savagery and all that stuff. I mean, the Jewish people, Edom, their bloodsheds and crap. Where do we see Edom becoming a little bit more menschlich? In the United States of America. In other words, the first fruits of labor of the Jewish people working with the world to produce and to elevate is in America, in a sense, is Esav rehabilitated. He's Esav elevated. And that's why the Constitution, the Satmar Rebbe said that that the Constitution was written Beruach HaKodesh. The American Constitution was written with divine assistance. It was incredible. It's the closest system to a tikkun olam before Mashiach. But once America is already, we know that when you take gold out of the ground and it's dirty, you refine it. After you go through one refinement, that's stage number one, but then you can put it through a second refinement, and you refine it again, and you refine it again, until you get the purest, the gold, the cleanest of the clean. So the first elevation, in a sense we might even call it Har Esav. That's why America is called the city on the hill. Har Esav. It's Esav, a light upon the nations. It's Esav on a more element, the Statue of Liberty, liberty for all. It's a symbol of decency, of human dignity. The United States of America, the leader of the free world, right? The United States of America itself, Jews come to America, and you know what happens? The majority of the Jewish people move to America in the last moments of exile. Why? Because that's where the final rectification is going to happen in America. The Rebbe, there's a lot of sichos from it, that the Shekhinah came to America together with the Jewish people, and this is where we do the last refining in the United States. When we finish the refinement with America, we're done. We said France, America, these different, the lowest needs to be elevated. Now, we find that the United States of America always acted like a klipas noga. What do we mean by that? America was always different than all the other nations. They were good friends to the Jewish people. We never had such a friend like the United States of America. But what did we say about noga? They're a mixture of good and bad. So the United States was always of assistance to Israel, to the Jews, but never completely. And I'll give you an example. During the Holocaust, first of all, many boats came and they were turned back. The United States of America had the possibility to bomb the tracks going to Auschwitz, and they didn't do it. There's a lot of blood on the hands of the United States of America for that. That's not a simple thing. I mean, what's important to God is the Jewish people and the safety of the Jewish people. That's the apple of God's eye, and everybody knows that. We shouldn't be embarrassed to say that to the entire world. That's the reality. So messing with the Jewish people in the way, that's no good. But on the other hand, the safe haven for the Jew was in America. So you realize, and after all, the United States was the one who liberated the camps. So you see, there's the yeah and the no. There is the mix. When it comes to Israel, the United States has been the best friend. Who gave the arms to Israel all the time for all the wars? It was the United States. But every time America supported Israel, giving them money, giving them what happened at the same time, they would always tie their hands. Go and do and then stop. Israel was always under incredible pressure. And the State Department, within the United States, the State Department particularly, the Congress was always very pro-Israel. The State Department was like, whatever. And had the deep state, as you call it. They were always. Now, the interesting thing is that in the State Department, officially, the lands that are what they call occupied territories, it was listed in the United States in the State Department's maps of that area as contested land, right? Always. By the very notion, when you think about when a guy straps himself, when a Palestinian suicide bomber straps himself with a vest, with explosives, and he walks in and he blows himself up, he's the evil guy who's perpetrating the act, but he's really doing it because he's a freedom fighter. He's being legitimate. He has legitimacy. What gives him legitimacy? What legitimizes him is the fact that the New York Times backs him. Of course they're going to say we condemn the greatest of this, but still we can understand where they're coming from. In other words, we give it to them. After all, there are people the land has been taken away. So do you realize that in a sense there is a tov v'ra, there is a mix and a good. It's not a pure. So now I'm not saying that why should America support Israel just 100% and without anything. I mean, obviously they're trying. I'm talking from a pure spiritual place. The Jewish people, God's people, that's holiness. Where does America stand in that? Very close to the Jewish people, big supporters of the Jewish people, but always been kind of in the middle. Not only that, the United States has been giving a lot of money to UNRWA, to all the very big supporting here, but supporting there. And there has never been in the history, you think about it, in any other country, when a country gains land in a defensive war, when a country comes under attack and they gained land as a result of it, that's understood internationally that becomes your land. You don't want that to happen, don't attack me. And you run the risk of me taking that land, that will be mine. But Israel, for some reason, has different rules. Israel has different rules. Even though we were attacked so many times, but still that land is not ours. And the United States has always been at the forefront, or a protector, but always klipas noga, which means that through them, and ultimately the one that counts more than anybody else is the world superpower, which is the United States. So where the United States is, that's really where everybody follows. The fact that the United States always remained pariv, and in many ways put pressure on Israel, and I'm not talking about even in the Obama years, but even before that, especially, you see, now, to me it's clear that in the Obama years, the ra of Noga, the bad of Noga, became very intensified. In other words, this pariv creature of the Chazer that's over here in the middle was pulled very, very much to the left, that we spoke already earlier. But the interesting thing is that that's the prophecy that we spoke about earlier, that the Chazer, eventually, after we finish doing all of our Torah mitzvahs, the good and the bad of Noga split. The good gets elevated into holiness, and then the bad automatically dies. So what happens? Once Trump took office in the United States of America, and once he became, what does he start doing? Number one, he starts supporting Israel 100%. Like we've never had before. He gives 100% support to Israel. But in addition to that, let's see what else he's doing. What did we say? Klipas Noga, spiritually, feeds the three impure klipas. Obama opened up billions of dollars to Iran. That's three impure klipas that are deadly bent on the destruction of Israel. And the same is also UNRWA and all these things that the United States has been supporting. The first thing he does is one of the things he does, he basically shuts the faucet. He kicks them out of Washington. He closes. He stops this. He pulls out of UNRWA. In the UN, Nikki Haley. Okay, it's a shame that she's not there anymore. Fought a heroic battle to legitimize Israel. You basically see a complete suffocation, shutting down of the flow, the money flow, the energy to all these people. Now, what an interesting thing is, not only do you see America kind of being elevated, the good separating from the bad, you see the same separation happening in the Arab world as well. You have all the Gulf states now. First of all, they lost their influence with their oil because oil is becoming less of a need. And what's happening is they're beginning to feel that their future is through being friends with Israel, not by being against them. So you have massive amount of, if you watched a few weeks ago when Kushner was in, what was the place called? No, in Bahrain. And he's sitting with all the like you say, the Yud Beis Nesiim, the 12 princes of Yishmael. That's really, it looks like. They're all sitting there with their, what do they call it, the kafias. They're all sitting, and is a Jew talking to them, speaking about the possibility of an economic revival and they're listening, and they're interested, and they want to make better relations with Israel. On the other hand, you have the extreme Hamas, you have the extreme negative of Yishmael moving to one side, and then you have a huge part of Yishmael becoming more and more aligned with Israel and with the Jewish people. But the main thing is in the United States of America. The interesting thing is that there was always a mix, and the support to Israel was always coming from both sides of the aisle. from the right side and from the left side. The interesting thing that happened this year, and it's on the one hand very painful, is that when there was the, you remember a few weeks ago, no, a few months ago, when there was the, what was it, the AIPAC. Everybody always knew whether you're Republican or whether you're Democrat. Everybody knew that what? You go to AIPAC. Because you need to be in good terms with the Jewish lobbies. You need AIPAC. AIPAC is very important. Whether you like them or you don't like them, you need them, kind of. And that was always been the feeling in the United States. The first year, besides Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, I think, but all the candidates who are actually running for office, they didn't come to AIPAC. In other words, they became such an anti-Israel undercurrent in the left that they're separating themselves from in other words, and if they know that if they align themselves with Israel, they're going to lose the support of their base. You hear what Bernie Sanders says. You see now who's becoming the hero. Al Sharpton, who's been the stimulator of the riots, is already also a hero. And you see now when the squad that is just outright. I mean, I would say just a simple. I'm sorry for saying this, but I'm just going to have to say it. Small little pictures of nobody are now dominating this entire. People that have absolutely zero experience, zero. See, Trump, you say, is also a Meshuggah. You say, but he's a man. What I mean a man? I don't mean a man. I mean he's a person who had a business in successful. He has what to show in his credentials. You're talking about here a person. People. I mean, this is America, so everybody can be. But the fact that they're holding Pelosi and Schumer and everybody at their whim. And they're pulling the Democratic Party wherever they want it to go is stunning. But to me, it's becoming very clear that this is the separation that's happening in Noga. One side of it moves completely towards holiness. The other side gets separated. Now, it's supported with another. Okay, we don't have time. I went far too over time. This is really, it's scary. But on the other hand, very, very, very exciting. Because what you're learning in Chassidus, as stated in Tanya, that this is the indication of the completion, of the elevation, that there is a birur in Noga, and what's happening is once the holiness of it moves to, it becomes defined. The other thing remains hollow and empty and without energy. Now, what does it mean practically? Is there I mean, let's hope we don't have to wait to another elections. Let's hope that Mashiach is going to be a way before that. But it almost looks like that it's not going to hold too strong because it's moving to a place where it doesn't have any legitimacy anymore. That's what I'm saying. It even though people might not like what's happening on the right and might be excited about the leader on the right and so on and so forth, the other side is becoming so unelectable, to put it, because it's based on a lack of, it's just fluff and ear without anything of substance, that it's gonna have to disintegrate. But on the other hand, you're seeing exactly what we spoke. And that's why it shouldn't be a chiddush. That's what we were asking, a question. Oh, wow, he's not, if this is a messianic thing, if this is a messianic, this is Mashiach in play, how can it be that he's not the most, he's leading up to Mashiach, so why isn't he refined? Well, what are we talking about? We're talking about the refinement of the fourth animal. And the fourth animal that we spoke about is not the most refined animal. But yet that needs to have a tikkun. And that all fits to what we were saying earlier, that which is coarse and that which is low, while it's coarse, while it's low, aligns itself and steps completely onto the side of Kedusha. And that's what we're having. We have hundreds and hundreds of millions of people today in the world that will do whatever they can for the support of Israel over here in South in South America by the millions, in the United States of America, the entire evangelicals and many others on the right. It's huge, and that's part of a process. Now, do they have certain beliefs that are not kosher, that are not, yes, but that's something that is very repairable at the drop of truth. In other words, when truth will reveal itself, when Moshiach will come, they've been waiting for a Moshiach. The fact that it's not the guy they were thinking, okay, it's a little detail, but they're with the program. They're with the general program. It's a little correction that needs to be made. Those that have an animosity to God, those that have a deeply embedded dislike for a God-given morality and for Hashem and for holiness, that is becoming very definable, strong, and expressed, and that's a birur. And that's what it says happens right before Mashiach comes, that things become very, very clear. Things move in two directions within this middle being. Okay. So l'chaim, the main thing is, there's a lot more to talk about all of this, and an amazing remuzim and all this. But one thing is for sure, we're living through incredible miracles and incredible wonders. We hope and we pray that we don't have to wait too long for the full process to unfold. We will already have a third Beis Hamikdash in place, Be'ezus Hashem, way before Tisha B'Av. Yes, l'chaim.